Sir Simon summarizes this episode, at least the beginning of it, when he tells Daemon that each side has suffered great loss and will be unsure of what's to come. There's a lot of truth to that, but others see it as an opportunity. There's a lot of grief, and much of what we saw in episode 5 is seen, heard, done through that heavy emotional filter. But at the same time, Rook's Rest created a power vacuum, and those who are not weighed down with grief will be quicker to take advantage. Those who keep their eyes, regular or sapphire, we don't discriminate here, on the prize, those types won't be taking any breaks. As Daemon says, it's the best time for a show of strength. Again, Daemon and Aemond having a similar reaction to things, doing similar things. But as Helena says to Aemond, was it worth the price? Because the wrong show of strength can backfire, as it does for both of them and for Sir Criston Cole. Tensions are flaring all over the Riverlands and in King's Landing, and we got to meet quite a few new characters in this one. There's more dreams, more references, more delving into Targaryen history, and some exciting setup for new potential dragon riders. It's a true mid-season episode getting us ready for all the rest and so much more to come. And we've got all that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. Another episode of History of Westeros podcast here for you today. It's episode 5. Here we are on Monday. It's 6 o'clock Eastern. That's when we do these. Wednesdays, we're here at 7 Eastern. Saturdays at 3. And we do game streams over at twitch.tv, History of Westeros, on Fridays at 6. Did I say at 6? At 6. At 6. At 6. Twitch.tv, History of Westeros. That's right. And I want to remind you all that we are going to be live at City Winery, New York City on August 3rd. Come see us. We'll recap the season, make a few predictions, and have a lot of fun in a live environment. And then those of you who can't make it there, well, we'll be posting it up so you can catch it after the fact. If you have any questions for us, send them to westroshistory@gmail.com or type them in the chat here if you're live, and maybe we'll shout you out or answer your question or refer to it in some way. And yeah, well, following in the footsteps of many a mid-season episode, this one sets up the second half, right? Expanding story, existing characters taking on new roles, new phases of their arc, new characters from a variety of locations. Power's a big theme. Also questions of leadership, who the leaders are, whether they deserve to be. Some of this is replacing what was lost. And of course, that huge element of grief that I mentioned. But it's really all the way throughout. Overall take, favorite scene, and performances. That's how we like to start. Sean, kick it on over to you. And also, hey, say hello while you're at it, because this is the first time I've referred to you in the episode so far. We're like speed running through the intro here.
One, I'll say you did have a good bit of alliteration in your intro there, however much you intended. I appreciated it.
I try.
I really love this episode. This is, it didn't have any kind of like big climactic reveals or action moments, but I appreciate all this sort of nuance and setup and the aftermath of the huge episode we had last time. I'd have a hard time picking a favorite moment or performance here, but
did you vote
not
in our
because
Facebook
there wasn't
poll,
a good one, because there are
Sean?
so many good ones. What's that?
Did you vote in our Facebook poll, or did you abstain?
I abstained because I was too uncertain. I don't like to vote unless I'm confident, unless I'm sure about it. Does that make sense? You know?
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I was guessing. That's why I asked.
I usually end up making multiple choices. That makes it easier for me. It is sometimes hard to pick one, although I didn't have a hard time this time, but we'll get to me.
If I'm being honest, it might be Daemon, and I just don't want to admit it.
Oh my god!
Well, I might cite Criston Cole for the second episode in a row, so
What a
like
role reversal we have today.
Hey, well, it's performance, not just and story, not just
True. It was.
But you're right.
It was a really good one. Like I said, I have a hard time naming one, but if I'm pressed, I might name the one at that meeting with Alicent. When the council meeting, when she's looking for support, she poorly assumed that she was going to have, 4 out of 7 people on her side, but it turned out she only had 1 on her side. Yeah. But, she looked at Lars, and Lars kind of deflected to Criston, and Criston was reluctant to answer her because he knew it wasn't, for a bunch of reasons. I don't think there's one simple reason he was reluctant to answer, but it was good. It was a very quick, nuanced, rich moment there.
Right on.
The another good line, maybe my favorite line of the episode, was when Daemon is talking to Alys Rivers. He says, "Surely you've mistaken me for an upright man."
You haven't. Yeah, right. Yeah, I was like, "Yep, nope." She's like, "No, yeah, I haven't, but still."
I'm going to make you feel bad for it. I'm going to make my attempt to make my case.
Right, and we'll dig deeper into all those scenes. What about you, Shea?
I'd say my favorite performances I voted for in our Facebook poll, which I love seeing who takes the lead and what people vote for and all that. I love seeing that. I voted for Bethany Antonia, who plays Baela Targaryen. I felt like it was finally her real big moment to shine. She did a great job. It was a really moving, powerful scene. Both her with Corlys and her with Jace were both good scenes. So I voted for her, and I voted for Fabian Frankel, Criston Cole, because I did feel that he played his role very well in showing how tortured and kind of traumatized he is, and how he couldn't look Alicent in the eyes, and there's just so much to his. I was very impressed by his performance. So yeah, I voted for those two, and I think my favorite scenes were the Baela Jace scenes, Baela scene, Baela Corlys, all of that stuff, just deepening these characters. I've been really dying to see.
My favorite was definitely the Baela Corlys scene. That, like, usually I have a struggle to pick a favorite scene. It was easy for me this time. I love how well she just cut through the grief to argue with him without shaming him and just said all the right things. It was like an expert, like, lawyer saying all the right things to convince a difficult jury. You know, it was just so, but it was way more meaningful than that. And I thought the performance was as good as the dialogue there. So for once, it was easy for me, and she is winning our poll. Also, doing quite well are Daemon. Matt Smith is doing pretty well, and Olivia Cook doing quite well. I think she might be in second, and then Corlys is doing quite well. I think he might be in third. But also Bobby the dog, aka Cheese Dog, got added to the poll, and he's doing well because, yeah, I mean, that's loyalty right there. But and he really sold that performance. That dog, like, he showed that loyalty really came through. I mean, it's very convincing. The dog wasn't acting, right? No.
Can I point out something maybe a little humorous?
No.
Yes. There was a motif, a couple moments here. I guess I also want to point out that I usually don't watch the next time on. I usually want to be able to speculate on the next episode without
extra unsullied.
Yeah.
You're not going to say anything.
Last week I did.
You're not going to say anything to this week.
Yeah, I didn't watch it this time. I did watch it last time, and I said something I maybe shouldn't have. I'm sorry about that.
It's not in the podcast. I edited it out.
Okay, but you know, if you hadn't watched the next time on, the imagery of Aegon coming through the street in that box might have been a little bit more mysterious. So we know what was going on there. I still think I probably would have pieced together. I still think I would have speculated he's still alive. Just the nature of how they present deaths on screen. I think he was going to be alive, and what else would be in the box? But there still was this "what's in the box?" Seven thought that came again when Rhaenyra handed Baela the little box.
Oh, the little box.
They have the pin for the hand in it, but what's in the box? It came up twice.
You know, that box reminded me of the box that Varys had shipped to him in the original Game of Thrones with the sorcerer that he had been hunting forever with no explanation of how he was caught or any of that stuff. Whatever. I was like, oh, that's a similar box. Yeah. So in an episode full of resets and redistribution of power and responsibility, leadership challenges, and waiting to see how the realm reacts to such a big event, it's good to see we start with a little passage of time. That cart with the head on it can only travel so many miles per day. And I know, like, this show and lots of shows aren't super tight with their timelines, you know, but still, this couldn't have been quick, right? It might have been just a week or so, but it definitely wasn't just a few days. The crowd reacts the exact opposite of how Cole maybe hopes or expects. And you can see why right away. Of all people, Freddie Fox, who plays Gwaine Hightower, said it best, because we have so many times likened dragons to nuclear events or nuclear weapons. He says, it's like seeing the first nuclear bomb dropped. you know there's going to be more, and where would they likely drop the next one? On the people parading the head of their enemy around, of their ally around, you know, like, of course they're going to hit that. So people are like, let's get the hell out of here. And so this is why this was kind of an obvious mistake on Criston's part, and why he's maybe miscast as Hand of the King. He doesn't have a political mind. He's thinking victory, battle, we win. Let's show that we won. It doesn't really go that much further in his mind, probably. And oops, because it doesn't go well. People have a very, like, hallowed, sacred, almost deific view of the dragons. Like, you see them, one person actually says, I thought the dragons was gods. And they're named after gods. So this really makes sense. They've never seen a big one killed ever. And when they've heard of small ones being killed, and it was by another dragon, a much bigger one. So they don't even believe what they're seeing. There's disbelief, even though it's right in front of their eyes. And all sorts of muttering. It's funny they call it a black omen, because it's like, yes, the black faction is mad about this, and that's who you're worried about. But one exception here is Hugh, who just says, it's just meat. You know, he doesn't think it matters that much. He's very much the minority, though. Everyone else is muttering and complaining, and worried is the biggest emotion, probably. Fear is the dominant thing here.
Well, him saying it's just meat, I kind of took that as disillusionment with the dragons in general. They're not gods, it's just meat.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people in that crowd are having that same reaction, and other people are having a different, there's a myriad of reactions, all of which are negative and not really good for the Greens.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, maybe I just kind of miscast what that meant, like the way he was viewing it, what he means by it meat. But either way, you're right. Like, it's dismissive, which is not what they want. The mystique of the dragons is so important. Yeah. It's the fear of them that keeps people in line. And without that, I mean, we have a thing called the doctrine of exceptionalism that was established in the time of Jaehaerys. And it was enabled Targaryens to be above the law because of these semi-godlike powers they had and these semi-godlike creatures that they rode. So, yeah, and by the end of the episode, you see that they're starting to talk about doing something else that maybe lessens the mystique and lessens the Targaryen hegemony over that nuclear weapon of sorts. So we'll get back to that. But yeah, Gwaine calls it a strange victory if it can be called one. So that's 2 battles, if you count the Battle of the Burning Mill, and 2 Pyrrhic victories, or 2 draws, just something along those lines. No clear wins yet, right?
You know, another thought about the dragon head coming through is that 2 things I wanted to say about it. One is I really appreciated that it had flies buzzing around it. That was like an element of realism that easily could have not been included, that I really appreciated. But it also adds to the perception of the people around it. Like, it wasn't this god. Like, you imagine even like a dead god might still glow and have this hum about it and this glisten, but no, it's rotting meat. It is not. It is not this sacred, pristine thing of beauty or even threat or whatever it might have been before. It does kind of bring the mystique of the dragons down a notch, and therefore the people that control them too.
Yeah. So there's multiple things that are happening there. There's the loss of mystique and the overwhelming fear of what's coming next, what kind of reprisal is coming from Rhaenyra. And on top of that, we have the starvation starting, not starvation, but getting to that point of look at the orange here. We got a rotten orange. People are buying these things, and that's the food that's available. And the Greens don't have a lot of money. They can't buy their way out of this problem, not in the short term. It's been pointed out a few different times that money is tight. So it's not like they can buy a bunch of food and distribute it, even if that occurred to them. Kat and Hugh argue about what they can do. Hey, that rhymed. Hugh already did this work for Aegon, it's said, somewhat. That's a taught to us or told to us during the conversation, and he still hasn't been paid. He was told he was going to be paid in advance, but now he's getting stiffed, it looks like. So it's not just a reneging of the deal, it's being stiffed on top of that. So Kat's like, look, we got to go. Like, you got to stop holding out for this promise. This king, like, we're not even heard from him. Like, where is he, And so he talks him into leaving, but then they go to the gate and it's too late. They're trapped inside, and what are they going to do? This is kind of where we're left with them, and they are eyes and ears to all the common folk of Westeros, and a lot of their peril, their crisis is a lot of people's crises, and now they're in it. They're in the thick of it, and who knows what's going to happen next. What do you have to say about that, Sean?
Yeah, that was there was a lot going on at that council meeting where this decision was made.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute, of course.
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it's connected because, Alicent is kind of absorbing everything that's going on, and the camera's kind of focusing in on her as the conversation is going around. And Aemond immediately kind of stepped up with these questions and decrees, one of which was to close the cities. And she seemed for a moment to kind of snap out of her bewilderment at that particular one.
Yeah,
she knew that was a bad call.
Yeah, she was. I like that. You're totally right. She was like disassociating. The way the camera like focused on her, and she was mostly just like, and she starts breathing heavily. And you're right. She was like almost like a reverie of disbelief. But that command was like, this is exactly like, this is what I'm talking about. You guys are idiots. Like.
And I've got a lot more to say about that scene when we get there, but it does tie into the moment when Criston tells Alicent, like, on one hand, I see his argument, right? He's like, at that battle, man, what I saw, this is the war of dragons now. We need a dragon rider to lead us. Like, okay, maybe in battle, but for this political decision of how to manage the city, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you.
Dragon rider, lock everyone in. It's awful. Like, who knows how many? I mean, it's like, also it was said it's 1,000 people. How many of those people had like their nephew was out getting corn and now he can't get back into the city for dinner tonight, or on and on and on. The food that was going to be for dinner out. Like I at some level they're trying to like control panic, but I think this is going to create more panic as we saw.
Well, I'm guessing there's a system in place for that farmer to get back in that night. Maybe there's some bureaucracy and he's out on the gates overnight or some hassle. But
yeah, people can go in and out. They just get checked. There's a system. You're right. It's not just completely locked down.
Probably not. And I would tell you.
No, it's definitely. They said that. Like that's what they that's how Linda got in, for example. Yeah.
Well, but she got in basically through.
But other people were being let in too. Still,
right.
They were checking people
first. The point I'm trying to build
first.
up to is what this is going to lead to is corruption. This is going to give a bunch of random guards the power over people.
Like we saw with Brienne.
Choose their friends and everything else.
At Maidenpool. Yeah, you're totally right. That's a good point. Like it gives authority to people who have not been vetted for being able to handle authority. Like, what are you going to do with this authority over people? When you have it, okay, you shouldn't have authority over people because you can't, you're that kind of thing. Yeah. So they're just giving power out to all these gate guards that some of whom will probably be decent, but a lot of them will be crappy. And you're right. And there's a lot of setup for the council scene and the eventual ascension of Aemond. Before that, one of them is during this scene of the head being paraded through the streets where Aemond and Alicent stand on the battlements together. They are the two options to lead, though that isn't necessarily clear at that moment. It becomes clear very quickly. Neither of them talk in that moment, but she still kind of looks at him and he doesn't really look at her. And she notices the dagger. The camera focuses on the dagger, which is sort of like foreshadowing of where things are headed. And then we go to the sickbed because the box is part of the procession kind of, and they show quite a bit of the box passing through a few different spots, through the castle, through the streets, etc. Helena sees it, and with her, it's always, you can't read her expression kind of ever, except unless it's something really extreme like blood and cheese, but she tends to have not a typical reaction to things, If she's on the spectrum, you wouldn't expect her to have necessarily standard reactions to stimulus, especially when we consider that she maybe knew this was coming or something like that. Like maybe she knows this already. So kind of inscrutable, also kind of like Aemond is, but for very different reasons. So Orwell starts to work on him. It's pretty gnarly. We're told in the behind the scenes that like the metal, it's Valyrian steel, so it doesn't melt, which might have been worse. And that is what happens in the book version. But it still was really bad because, it didn't melt into his flesh like it would have if it was regular steel, but it was so hot and it continued to stay hot that it like burned an ear off, the side that was hit more, like that ear is missing.
His flesh burned into the Valyrian steel rather than the steel burning into his flesh.
Good point. And like there would have been cloth under that armor. You're not just wearing that against your bare skin, but that's obviously all gone now. It just burned away. It was just incinerated completely because of the extreme heat. They talk about broken bones and internal injuries, that knee snapping together. That was entirely unnecessary, but but I guess it really shows how bad he's in. And it's so touch and go because like you feel for Alicent for a minute there. She looks over and she sees the Silent Sisters and is like, oh, well, they're only there to dress the dead. And they're just like standing there waiting as if they might be needed any moment. So that's pretty ominous if you're a mother. And yeah. Orwell. Okay,
it's almost like seeing the Grim Reaper in the room.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it really is. And they have their masks on and everything. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's pretty that's pretty dark. So Orwell does his work, you know, he's focused and carrying on the way he does. And I love how the Maesters, when they're in doctor mode, they have that hood up, like, you know, it's like keeps the hair out or something. I don't know. But we come back. He passes the buck to the gods, which is, again, we pointed out how this is a smart Grand Maester. He didn't answer Alicent last week when she asked about the succession. He's like, I don't know. Here he's like, it's in the gods' hands now. Like, you do not, that's the downside of being the doctor to a king or like a powerful person. Like, you get blamed for something going wrong. They can easily scapegoat you because they don't know better. Like, politics can put you in the crosshairs of the blame game. So he's immediately like, it's in the gods' hands now. And he says, I don't know if he's ever gonna wake up. Just setting the expectations very low, which smart choice and probably true too. Because yeah, internal injuries, all those burns. Yeah, he's in bad shape. Now, the perhaps the most forward moment of this episode, or this scene rather, or the one that affects things going forward the most, is when Aemond comes in, and it's notable how much deference there's. Everyone, it's like the parting of the tan and gray sea, because people are dressed very plainly because they're, you know, medical and priestly people. And he just stares down at the bed, and then he says, someone will need to rule in his stead. Camera focuses on him for a sec, then it focuses on Alicent. Again, just showing us the two options, right? That was pretty interesting there, but fairly straightforward, I think, in its execution. They're telling us what's to come. But I think a little more importantly, we have Cole talking to Alicent about Sunfire. Now, we're going to focus a little more on Cole and Alicent's conversations, but I want to select this moment to talk about it separately, because it's a little ambiguous, but yet in some ways it's not. I want to get your take on this, Sean, and other people, if you're listening, especially if you're live, but even if you're not, I want to hear from you on this as well. Cole tells Alicent that Sunfire, quote, was a long time in the dying. Now, he didn't wait, though, to find out. Clearly, like, what's he do? Well, we'll sit here with the badly wounded king and wait for this dragon to pass or not. And then we'll go home. Like, clearly, no. He was going straight home to get the king medical attention. So maybe a rider caught up to them on their own. Was like, yeah, Sunfire's dead now. But you know, like, it's just a little awkward there. I'm not sure. What did you how did you take this moment, Sean? What did you interpret from that? How did you read that? What did it communicate to you?
I took it to mean that Sunfire is dead. That's what I got from it.
Okay.
I was uncertain, but that I pay particular attention on my second watch to exactly what he said, and it sounded to me like when you add other context, like I left guards by the dragon, or we sent a maester to nothing else, just he was slowing the dying. That was it.
See, this is what I think. I don't think there's any way they took so long to wait there for Sunfire to die. If Sunfire was truly long in the dying, they didn't wait. And I think you could say Aegon is long in the dying too right now, and he's not dead. So I just don't, I think if no one stayed there with that dragon, I don't assume that the character is dead unless I've seen them dead.
Well, he did say he left people with the dragon. He said he left the garrison and people to guard the dragon, who was a long time in the dying.
Yeah, who was long in the dying? That's why people are there.
The castle. He said he left a small garrison at the castle.
Yeah,
with the dragon, and to watch the dragon. He said he left it for both. He specified both. Anyway,
so, I just personally, I would not assume that Sunfire is dead unless I saw the dragon dead.
Okay, yeah, we'll see.
I will say maybe he is alive, just like Aegon, but also he's effectively not a dragon anymore. He's not about to take off and breathe fire or anything.
Sure,
yeah.
Surely in horrible shape, if alive at all. Yeah. So later in the episode, Aegon does wake up, which is meaningful. Not necessarily a sign that he will survive, but it's more likely than not that it's a good sign, right? It's certainly the fact that he wakes up at all, and it's a little sad. He calls her mummy, and she comes back, and at this point, she doesn't have a whole lot else to do. I mean,
she comes back. She doesn't come back.
She comes back when he says that.
She doesn't come back to him.
She didn't hear it. She was
didn't
like on the
hear
way
it.
out
Oh,
the
my bad.
door.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
He didn't hear. She didn't hear. Okay.
No, she's the door's like closed and she's gone.
I
and
thought she heard.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
I just have a
positive.
false memory. All right, then. Anyway, let's talk about the council scene. This is pretty huge, right? This is where Orwell begins saying Aegon is in their hands now. And this is one of the passing of responsibility theme of the episode that comes up quite a lot. And Alicent brings up the Regency, and like you said, Sean, only Orwell supports her. It's 2 against 7, roughly, her and him, and that's it. And she's kind of embarrassed. She didn't, like you said, she didn't see it coming. Maybe she should have, probably should have, but maybe not quite in the way it did. Because neither Cole nor Larry Strong support her, and I think she thought they would be on her side.
Yeah.
And Laris's argument is like, look, we're team elect the man. We can't, like, whether I agree with that or not, that's who we've made ourselves out to be, you know? And he passes the buck to Cole really brilliantly. He's like, so you speak with the hand speaks with the king's voice, you know? And he looks like he would rather be in Aegon's place than answer that question right there. He is so embarrassed and despondent, and like Shea said, will not look her in the eye. Look at you've got the picture ready. He just refuses to meet her gaze. He's embarrassed about a lot of things and traumatized, and just kind of doesn't think he has a choice, I think, in a lot of places. Isn't necessarily a defense, but I do think that's his state of mind, right? And they all...
I wondered...
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say real quick? I wondered if one thing he was thinking, among all this sort of turmoil in him, I think that he is honestly trying to be, quote unquote, the hand of the king, who should, like, their role is to do what the king would do. And he knows if Aegon was in a room right now, Aegon would pick Aemond, not Alicent. I think...
I'm not sure that's true, but I agree with your logic. Like, I'm not sure that he would pick his brother over Alicent, but I think he would.
Part of what's going on in Criston's mind.
Absolutely,
He's trying to think, I should do what the king would do. What would the king do? I think the king would pick Aemon. So.
I agree. What would the king do is the question he's trying to answer in his mind. He's trying to go by like the standard system. Like, this is what would do. We put the heir in charge because he's next in line. That's how the system works. Yeah. He's just doing what's expected of him, or what he thinks is expected of him. So Aemond says nothing during the whole debate, just waits for it to play out because he can see how it's going. He doesn't need to say anything. Stands up, collects the king's orb, moves to the front of the table, and he places it very distinctly in a way that's different than all the ways Aegon was always playing with the ball, rolling it around, you know, slamming it around, moving it. Aemond very calmly, disciplinedly, you know, and says it's decided then, and then just starts issuing orders. And it's like, wow. But we know what she says before this is true. She says, look, this guy, he looks calm and disciplined, but this is the guy that lost his temper with Era as a diplomat. You know, he's not actually as calm and collected as he seems. You know, he just puts that face on really, really well. I mean, if we're being honest, he does put that face on extremely well, but he's actually quite emotional internally. He just hides his emotions. He's just guarded with that.
One of his first edicts is really good, though. Can I tell you? Everyone wanted those rat catchers down.
That was his good command. That was the one really good command. Like, thank you. Finally, cut down the rat catchers. That was good.
Can I say, by the way, in the opening credit with the tapestries, how are we still getting the rat catchers featured?
I know why.
The Dance of Dragons featured.
Because we haven't seen the aftermath. Like, the Melee's head is probably what they're gonna show, Sean. I'm guessing. That's just my theory. Haven't seen the episode or anything like that. I'm just guessing that like we don't see the actual blood and cheese and killing Jaehaerys, we see the aftermath and the rat catchers hung there and the body. I think we'll see the body of the dragon Melee's in the streets.
Too early for the history to be told.
Whereas when we see Vhagar, and Arax, when we see them together, I think that is the fight. That is the boss. Like, that's what's remembered. So I don't know.
Well, what Shea was saying is that they didn't change it right away after Blood and Cheese. They waited till after the Rat Catchers, which was episode 2. Yeah. Blood and Cheese was episode 1, and it didn't show up at the tapestry till episode 3. Till they had, like you said, the aftermath was included. Anyway, so that is probably what will happen now. So as we progress through the scene, there's Alicent's disassociating, but it's interesting what happens while she's disassociating. And we talked about that, but not what was said besides the order to close the gates. The other thing that comes up is that Aemond comes after Larys like right away, like, but not in the same way that Aegon did. He's like, it's your castle, you know, you let him have. That's what Aegon said. But in this case, she's like, why would I trust a man who let the jewel of the Riverlands fall into our enemies' hands? It's a very different approach. And Aemond doesn't, or Larys doesn't say anything. And remember, Sean, this guy hates Strongs. It's a very different vibe. It's personal to him, which Larys might be very wary of. You might be like, oh yeah, this is bad. So a developing situation there. There's not much we can say about it now other than guesswork, but it's something to keep an eye on. Did you catch that? Did that occur to you in the time that it's a strong thing, or?
I didn't think of it in that way, but I did think of it in the, I don't know. I think Larys knows the potential trouble he's in, right? I think he's got this plotted out. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but he seems to be very aware and forward thinking. He probably knew he's got to put his tail between his legs for both Aegon and Aemond, and just let his work speak for itself. That's what I think he's going to do. Is like, look, I know you distrust me, but I'm going to get XYZ done for you, and you'll appreciate it. And
that's his MO. I think you're totally right. That's a really good way to put it.
I wonder, I mean, you brought up him distrusting Larys because of whatever, the strong connection. I'm curious how much Aemond is aware of his Alicent connection, because Aemond does have some distrust of his mother, and certainly of people having other agents. If he might have some suspicion of Larys' connection to his mother, especially if he has any suspicion of anything untoward ever happening between them, then he would really not like Larys. So, I mean, Larys really needed to support Aemond there. In addition to it he's right for the reason he said. He gave a good reason when he said that it wouldn't look good for them. But I think he was also right in that he has to really support Aemond so that he's not just like removed from the council.
Yeah.
Alicent didn't perceive that was his problem. He has to suck up to Aemond or he could be in big trouble. She didn't catch that, yeah.
Right. I think that was, Larry's probably had everyone on the council pegged pretty well about how it was going to go. And even if it turned out they wanted to put Alicent in charge, he still needed to be on Aemond's side. And then if they choose Alicent, fine, it's easy to go back to her. But
yeah, I agree with that. So Aemond thinks he's smarter than his brother because he's just like, well, I wouldn't make that rat catcher mistake or do all this Kingsguard, nonsense. But he closes the gates like a dummy. And Alicent, Otto would not have done that and would not have done that. So let's talk about Cole and Alicent's conversations. There's two of them, plus their interaction during the council session, which of course colors it all. But the first one's before that. The first was before she's ousted. And this is when she comes to talk to him about what happened during the battle. He's cleaning his sword. Another great sign of guilt. He's wiping the blood off his sword. It's still there. It's hard to clean off, just like it was hard. She was scrubbing the guilt off of herself a few episodes ago, also in Futility. It's very similar, the two moments, I think.
I also think it's indicative of he's doing what he knows right now. He's got a lot of uncertainty and confusion and frustration, but he knows how to be a knight. He knows how to maintain his, let me just do the one thing I know I can do right and clean my sword. He's trying to find some sort of comfort and control over his life. Which
I like that. Yeah.
Discombobulated right now.
Like a simple task to kind of center yourself. Yeah. It's a little slightly meditative, I suppose, but it's still stained with this blood of these things. Because he talks about, she comes in and he's like, 900 casualties at Rook's Rest. And that's, they turned it up one notch from the book, which had 800 casualties. They're like, take that, George. We're a little bloodier. So, but, he's not the kind of man that tries to hide his emotions. He's already a little stoic, but he's less stoic now after what he's seen. And when she's like, well, what happened in the battle? And he's like, the king fought valiantly. It's very just diplomatic, straightforward. What about Aemond? And then he just stops. He's like, I couldn't say. And, he surely has his suspicions, but this is, it's hard to tell what's going on in the air. He also realizes probably in that long walk home with the dragon head behind him that Aemond's going to be leading them from now on. He already knows that. And he's not going to, as a knight, like you said, Sean, he's a hand. He's Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. He's not going to speak disloyally to the guy about the guy that's leading them now. It's like calling out the president during wartime. You just don't, that's the thing you just don't do when you're on, especially when you're higher up on the same team.
I also think that this conversation, It reminds me of in a certain way, it reminds me of the conversation Alicent had with Orwell when he brought her the moon tea. Criston isn't giving her direct answers, but he is effectively still answering her questions. The fact that he doesn't answer is answering the question. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, she knows what he's asking. He knows what she's asking, and his avoidance of the answers is the answer.
Yeah, she tells him everything. Yeah, you're totally right. That tells her everything she needs to know, which confirms her worst fears. Like, yeah, I think he did it on purpose, but he's not entirely sure. But the fact that it might be true is bothersome and worrisome enough. And this is part of the conflict of being Lord Commander and Hand. These roles don't always fit together. If you're the Hand or the Regent, you speak with the King's voice, but the Lord Commander is supposed to keep the King's secrets. And those two things right now are very much at odds in this moment of what happened at the battle and what was the Regent doing, what was his intention. So, yeah. Now, the second time they have their conversation, it's after she's basically ousted from the council and Cole is taking down the rat catchers. And we get Cheese Dog, a.k.a. Bobby the dog, right there. It's great, But Criston is no longer Alicent's lapdog. He's Aemond's. He's not happy about it, but doesn't exactly resist, as we just said. She sees it as not just a personal betrayal, but a moral betrayal. Like, you were supposed to be my ally. Like, this is part of why we were banging. We'd help each other. But that part's kind of simple. Like, you betrayed me on a personal level. But the morality is like, look, you just told me without telling me, as you expertly pointed out, Sean, that you know what kind of man this is, that you know what we're dealing with. Yet you still elected him to be in charge. Like you said, Sean, this guy, good general probably, but like, he's already made a bad decision as Hand, and Aemond did too, but he doesn't recognize that he made a bad decision. She doesn't point that out directly, and I mean, it's too late to, like, it's not going to change anything.
I think you asked Shea last time if I thought Criston Cole could read and write. He's walking around with like a notebook.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he got a letter last time too. Last episode. Yeah, it's been proven that he can.
Which makes me glad that he's more competent as the Hand than he might have been.
So Cole thinks he's saving her a bit by like, look, we're gonna have to do terrible things, and he's been traumatized by those terrible things. He doesn't want her to be traumatized by that too, or to be responsible for it. Now, again, he doesn't have the best thought process here about everything. His heart might be sort of in the right place, but it's wrong from what she wants. She finds it insulting. She's like, no, I'm a leader. I can handle it as much as you can. And she repudiates him on both counts. Again, the personal and the professional. I wonder if their relationship is over. I don't think they've hooked up since he's been named Hand, and it doesn't look good for that right now. We'll have to see. Now, Sean, consider... Yeah, go ahead.
There's more eyes on him. He's got more duties, bringing him to more places. He's out
in the field,
the road at war.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a million reasons in addition to like the emotional ones, the physical situations that they find themselves in, the political responsibilities, everything. Yeah, I feel like he just can't be the companion to her that he was before. He just can't.
Yeah. This is a major fall for Alicent. She has lost almost all of her power in a flash. She has no position on the council anymore. She no longer has personal power over her son because Aegon was at least somewhat malleable, somewhat listened to her. Doesn't have that with Aemond. Larys is no longer really on her side, and Larys is, well, at least he might not be visiting her anymore with his creepiness because there's less reason for him to. She doesn't have the power for him to exploit. And she doesn't have power over Cole anymore. There's no personal power there. He's not listening to her. He's not doing what she wants. So it's like, wow, that's just... all of her influence is gone really quickly. Kind of like 2 episodes ago, she and her father were planning, well, I'll stay here and continue to pave a way. Maybe you can return. Well, that's gone in completely the opposite direction.
Regarding whether the relationship is over or whatever, I took her saying, don't call me Alicent, keep my name out of your mouth, whatever, as being like, we're no longer together.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I only left it open because, sometimes people say things and get back together. I don't, but, and of course, not a book plot, so we have no idea.
I really loved this scene, though, by the way. It was one of my favorite scenes because I did feel that it was so nuanced with I mean, Criston has kind of a pretty noble intention with what he says to Alicent, and I don't think he's wrong, and I don't think she's wrong either, that she kind of wants to be given that choice and that ability, but I think she's better off not being intimately aware with the atrocities of war. Everyone is better off not knowing. So, like, you know, I see his point here, really. Like, any half decent person would try to save someone they care about from being party to that, right?
She doesn't fully know what she's turning down or saying you're saving me from. She didn't see the battlefield. She didn't see what he saw. So that's part of his, if you want to argue a little bit in Criston's favor, and I agree with you, it's very nuanced. No one is completely in the right here. No one's completely in the wrong here. And I also agree it was an amazing scene. This is part of why I picked Fabian Frankel as one of my top actors again. Olivia Cook was also fantastic, but yeah, they're both, it's just really complicated, and one of the horrors of war. It puts them in these situations that the best you can do is horrible. Like, your best option is still a horrible one.
I want to point out there's a parallel in that scene with the council when she's kind of reeling back from having lost her position. And the camera's kind of focusing on her while all these other conversations and decisions are being made. It was very similar to what happened in the Black Council with Rhaenyra. And she ends up saying it to Mysaria, but she's like, they're talking around me. You know what I mean? That was exactly what was happening to Alicent. The same thing was happening to the...
Yeah, you're totally right.
Sensible leader and woman, the matriarch of each of the councils, were being treated pretty much the same way by the men around them.
And the side that it was more open to women leadership in the first place is the side where that's kind of working itself out a bit, or at least seems to be on a decent track. Where here, Alicent's just out. She's just out of power now. Like, there's not a woman on that council anymore. They have, like, that influence is gone. And it kind of harkens back to Rhaenys telling her that, like, you know, you don't want freedom. You want to carve a whole window in your prison, and that window has been shut. And like, if Alicent was over on the black side, she'd still have a voice of counsel probably. So, throne room on the opposite end of the power spectrum. Alicent's fallen the farthest this episode. Aemond has risen the most. Almost certainly that's a fact. He stares at the throne like many before him, including Daemon or Littlefinger. Therefore, a lot of characters have just kind of stared in silent reverie at the throne. It's a kind of a classic Game of Thrones way to show somebody's ambition, or they're considering the nature of power or their power. But there's a few tweaks here to the vibe, to the usual approach. At one point, it angles up at him, which makes it look like he's looking down on the throne, which is sort of like he's not the king, he's the regent. He's in control of the king. He's in control of the throne. He's looking down on it. But also he was looking down on his brother in that sickbed, right? He was looking down on him and kind of looking down on him metaphorically because he thinks he's superior to him. We actually first thought the scene would be a dream. We first saw it in trailers and stuff like that. It had that vibe. Daemon's also had, it was like, oh, it might be a parallel to Daemon's dream, but no, it was not. But there is a dreamer present. A twist. Mm-hmm. Not a dream, but features a dreamer. Helena kind of sneaks up on him like that. Like, did she know he was there? It's like, this is cool. How did she? This is a very interesting moment. She asks if it was worth the price. But of course, like so many other times in this episode, he keeps his thoughts and feelings to himself, even though this is maybe one of the few people he might open up to a little bit.
Can I say, I love the phrasing of was it worth the price here, because it's such a loaded question. It made me think of the price for Vhagar of losing his eye. Was like that, there's one price. Like, how many prices has Aemond paid? You know, you think about like the death of Luke, you know, about the price of the obvious thought is Aegon, the price of being another kinslayer potentially, of taking him out, because then it immediately cuts from this scene to Aegon to make you put that in your head. But I think because it's Helena, I think it can't just be about Aegon. I feel that it's, when she says something like this, I feel it has layers, and the first layer I thought of was Vhagar and his eye.
I wonder if it might be I don't know what word he uses exactly, betraying Alicent, betraying his mom. Because it seemed like Helena does still have a strong bond with her mom. And now she's going to Aemond, who just kind of stepped all over their mom. And was it worth the price? You know, is it worth betraying your family as a whole, you know?
It's a very good point.
Yeah, like I said, I just love the phrasing, how you can see so many layers to a single phrase like that, right? Yeah.
And there are a lot of layers to her phrase. I felt like when she said the boy is dead, like her wording.
Yeah,
like,
they killed the boy.
Allow for a lot of interpretation.
To be clear,
they killed the boy. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved your breakdown of they killed the boy, Sean. That was really. The more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Just way back to 3 weeks ago.
So her phrasing does allow for a lot of interpretation.
Yeah, it really does. And I just like there's a lot of interpretation as to Aemond's actions, and part of his inscrutability makes it even harder to tell. And I think he's channeling Aegon the Conqueror a bit here. Who was also unscrutable and wasn't a man that liked to show his emotions or let people know what he was thinking. He sort of projected a vibe. It's a different sort of power vibe. Like, I don't owe anyone answers. That's how above you all I am. I owe you nothing. You are beneath me. It's a different kind of power. It's a stone face. But again, we know it's a facade. With Aegon the Conqueror, it might have been legit. With Aemond, he's a rage of emotion. He's got all sorts of things going on in that head, right? He's got a temper, but at least he goes to therapy. But so does Tony Soprano. In an interview with the official House of the Dragon podcast, which, by the way, we have Jason Concepcion coming on to guest with us, as he has a few times before, this Wednesday the 17th, that is. He said, Ewan Mitchell said that part of the reason he's different than his family is because they all bonded with their dragons as hatchlings, and there's like a connection there, a little bit of a vibe and a two-way street there. It's not as powerful as a skin changer vibe as far as we know, and Ewan Mitchell didn't get into that stuff. Just pointed out that according to the script, there's a bit of a connection there, and he never experienced that. All his other siblings did. Helena, Aegon, and his half-brother, or his nephews, rather, Jace and Luke and all of them. But
don't forget his other sibling, Rhaenyra.
Yeah, right. And Rhaenyra and even his younger brother, Daemon, who we haven't seen yet, has been mentioned, but we know he has a dragon, and his egg was hatched with him, too. So Ewan Mitchell says that, so Aemond is different in that regard, and it's part of when he says to Sylvie, like, they hate me because I'm different, or they tease me because I'm different. That's part of the difference, not just an actual difference, but a perceived difference that he sees within himself. He's like, all my family had this and I had this. So his dragon bond is with a much, much older being that came in a different stage of life, and that does set him apart a little bit. Now, here's a question. Otto might look a little better in retrospect in some ways, not in others, in saying that keeping Daemon off the throne, the way Daemon's been acting, as we'll get to, is like, man, it's making Otto look more and more right about avoiding a King Daemon. But is it really better with this effective King Aemond? Yes, regent technically, but effectively King Aemond. Is that any better? I don't know. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And right now, Aemond is more capable of doing damage than Daemon is, because he has a bigger dragon, and he has more absolute power over his faction right now. Daemon is a rogue from his face. He's literally the rogue prince, like his book character name or title or, nickname. Rhaenyra has less control over the blacks that Aemond has right now, even though she's a queen and he's, a regent. And they're also more scattered and not in possession of the throne or capital. So Aemond is probably the most powerful character at this moment. Of course, that is subject to change within 2 minutes of the next episode, or it could last for several more episodes and into next season. We'll see. But I think that's a fair statement. What do you think, Sean? You think that's about right? Aemond the most powerful right now?
I think so. And I will say, even though we've seen Aemond do some, I don't know, unscrupulous things, I still feel like he has more, I can't think of the exact word I want to use, honor, integrity, predictability, even maybe, than Daemon or some other characters.
More of a code, maybe? But maybe
code,
it's not a moral or, I wouldn't call, that's why I didn't say a moral code, but a code.
Because I don't think that he seems to have this, I guess it's interesting that I don't exactly know what his goal is. He feels like he should be king. Like, I prepared for this better than anyone else. I am more skilled, more knowledgeable than Aegon or most of these other people, right? And so maybe he feels like he should be it. But I don't think he's like, I want to be king so I can go take over Essos, or I can tax the poor, or I can rape a bunch of women. He doesn't seem to have a bunch of like vicious, scary motivations beyond ambition for the throne. Where Daemon does. Daemon just seems like he just wants to do whatever makes him happy, whoever might suffer in the meantime. He doesn't seem like he wants to be king to being peace to the land or something. He just feels like it. I don't know how to say it. You see what I'm saying?
I don't think we know why Aemond does either, but you're right. Yeah.
He seems more unpredictable with the power that he might have. I think, my best guess is if we flash forward and Aemond is king and the war is over, he will have relatively good policies. He will listen to his counsel. He will, be prudent.
Perhaps.
Daemon will be wild and crazy and go off and be literally absent. He'll just be gone and people won't even know where he is.
That's entirely possible.
I still imagine Aemond would be a little bit too much of a hardliner with some things. I mean, even as we saw with him closing the gates, I think he might make some drastic choices that might lead to some heartache. But I think you're overall right that in a time of peace, I think he would be a half-decent king. And I think with time and experience, he would probably learn better and take counsel and stuff. But this is a time of war. And I don't think in a time of war, he's going to be as prudent as you're talking about.
Well, maybe not, but he's not going to be. He can't be much worse than Daemon. Daemon just started a terror campaign, so maybe Aemond would do that too. But
he did. I mean,
teenager Aemond did this in a time of war. I'm more likely to forgive.
Aemond has. Let's be clear. Aemond has already done this. Just to correct you slightly here, Sean. I do agree with most of what you said, but Criston Cole and Aemond planned together. He wasn't there to do it, but it was part of his plan, and he signed off on it to sack Duskendale. They despoiled families, took loot, raped women. All that happened there too. Maybe not quite as bad. Maybe there's probably less abuse of women there, but it was still
probably
houses
less
looted.
Sept despoiling.
Yeah, less sept despoiling for sure. But it's the same thing. They're forcing conscripts to charge into a dragon, and it's not that different. I do agree with you though overall that Daemon is more certainly a problem. Aemond doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeves. Daemon does. That's a big difference between the two of them, is that more about what Daemon's about. He does not hide and when he tries to hide it, it comes out anyway. He's kind of bad at that. Aemond is just keeps it in. I don't have as much faith in that. I think it's like, I see the darkness there, and that's got nothing to do with what I think is coming in the books. Just this version of the character just seemed like the way they frame him, the way they're trying to make him look. They make him look pretty villainous, but they definitely leave doubt. Anyway.
Maybe I'm still too hung up on the moment when he killed Luke that he seemed to regret it. And then they brought it up again when he was talking to Sylvie. He seems to have regret for that moment, but is sort of just accepted his role like, well, we're at war. I killed him. It doesn't matter if I apologize. I just have to own it. And for better or worse, I feel like that's some of the dark things he's doing, are just acceptance of this conflict. Not that necessarily makes it okay. Whereas a lot of the dark things that Daemon do, just because he's greedy and selfish and inconsiderate or whatever.
Sean, something I realized recently was plenty of things happen off screen, off the TV screen or whatever. But Aemond, I think, as far as we have seen, has only killed someone via his dragon. We have not seen on our TV screens Aemond kill anyone like via sword or he hasn't had a personal kill.
That's a good point.
He stomped on tons of people. He's definitely killed people. He killed Luke in a little bit more of a personal way, and he felt regret. I'm super curious. It's possible he has just killed someone in hand-to-hand combat, but I don't know. I don't know if he has, And I wonder. I don't know that I expect to see him feel awful about killing someone in hand-to-hand combat, but it's interesting to me that he maybe hasn't.
If he has, they haven't showed it to us.
No, they haven't.
Definitely showed us Daemon do it over and over again.
So, with one thing I disagree with you on there, Sean, is we clearly are seeing Daemon does have guilt and he does have remorse. That's a big part of what his dreams are about, like showing that he does have these emotions. It's just that his ambition is stronger than his guilt. For now, maybe it's how it's going to stay, but it's those dreams prove that he's not entirely a sociopath. He does actually care. And Aemond maybe does too. It's just less clear with him because, as we keep saying, he's more guarded, and that it's harder to perceive what's on his mind. My friends, if you are enjoying our content, we sure do have a lot more coming this season, and we've been working pretty hard. Ashea does so much editing. It's crazy how much we hit the road and put the rubber to the road during the season. And if you want to pitch in and help our efforts, you can go over to our website, historyofwesteros.com, and pick one of the different ways to support us. The most straightforward way is to click on the Patreon link. And you can, of course, go straight there, www.patreon.com/historyofwesteros, and sign up. You can get a lot of bonus episodes. You get bonus content. You get your cool nickname if you are so inclined. We can pick one for you, or you can tell us what you have in mind if you already want a name. Those names get read aloud during our occasional scripted episodes. And we also have things like access to our notes, and which means our scripts and stuff like that. A lot of great stuff. And so if you're consuming a lot of our content, why not sign up? Why not get even more content and help keep the show as strong as it could be? And of course, showing up at our Twitch streams on Friday is another fun way to support the show indirectly, because that is a good fun time, but it is also podcasting time. And we do get a little bit of revenue from that. So if you show up at twitch.tv, History of Westeros, Fridays at 6, we have a lot of fun with that. We have what's called the Large Council, where y'all vote on things like what to name my characters and what to name castles and what decisions to make, whether to go to war, whether to murder somebody, whether to make an example of all the criminals by sticking them up on spikes around the castle, or what to name our pet dog, or whether to try to hatch a dragon egg with blood magic. There's all sorts of weird things in that game, but that's really cool. You can even do a red wedding in that game. It's called a massacre wedding. It's the generic version is called a massacre wedding, because the red wedding is a very specific one. So, yeah. I wish I had more time to deep dive into the music. It's one of the parts of the show that is one of my favorites, yet I research the least. I just kind of enjoy it. But I've been noticing this season, there's a lot of variations on songs that we've used before, which is a normal thing to do. It's, it's like a leitmotif, kind of returning to a theme, but doing it a little bit differently. And I rely on my phone a lot to identify songs, but some of these, even though they're similar to existing ones, the phone doesn't know that. It's different, so it doesn't recognize that similarity. It's not like, hey, what is this similar to? That's not how it works. So I can't wait for those to be published so that we can identify them and have those names going forward, because occasionally it's very telling. Like, remember at the beginning of the season with Goodbye Brother, how meaningful that was to that song choice? And part of the reason we noticed that is because it's such an iconic song, the Stark theme song, basically. But some of these other ones are like, that one's familiar. It sounds sort of Targaryen-ish. It's one of those Dany songs, but I don't know exactly which one it is. And I bet there's more going on. I bet there's a message here and there that I'm missing.
I want to make a similar comment. The lore of this show is so thick, and the plot and the characters are so rich that that's enough to take up all our attention in our discussion. But geez, the cinematography is freaking beautiful. I think this episode especially, there's a couple unique things about it, that those opening couple shots with Rhaenyra, looking out on the ocean, and there was a scene when they kind of show Daemon. He's laying down, but the camera kind of turns the angle up. And even the backdrop, the setting there, the engraving on the wall behind him. Like, there's so many things that segue when he leans against the fireplace, and it cuts to Rhaenyra leaning against the fireplace. So cool. There's a lot of cinematic and editing decisions that I just love about the show that understandably get overshadowed by the great performances and the great story and everything. Yeah. But I just wanted to bring all that stuff to light real quick.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and if we're being honest, that's me personally, I'm just not as good at talking about that kind of thing. Like, I notice these things, but I don't always have the words for them, and I don't know what to say about them. I was like, that was really cool, but yeah, we're all enjoying it. The same thing with the music. Like, I pay attention to it, but I have less to say about it. So we go over Dragonstone. The, quote, women aren't trained in war point comes up over here as well, and it's handled a little better. Now, this is interesting to me. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been trying to figure out how to parse the misogyny from the you don't have war experience, which is a fair point to a certain extent. And I think it comes out very clearly in the scene where that distinction is. Rhaenyra is very, very calmly explains, it's like, yeah, you're right. I don't have experience in war, but you don't either. You only have theoretical training, which counts for something. It definitely does. You spent all that time in the saddle and hitting each other with your swords, even though it was practice. That counts for a little something. All those time reading books and studying strategy, that counts for something. But the laughing at her, the talking over her, you would not do that to a man. And you would not, and it's not because she's not good with the sword. It's like, oh, that's why I'm talking over you, because you're bad at fighting? That's not a good reason. Like, can you imagine the Master of Coin talking over? It's like, oh, you don't understand finance, my queen. Let me tell you how it really is. Like, or the Master of Laws, like, you don't understand laws, my queen. Let me tell you, ha ha, that's so dumb. You know, like that's not gonna, so it's not a good reason to treat her like that. But there is when it was distilled in this moment, when she like corners him, he does say, okay, yeah, like he does break it down a little fairly, and it's not quite so misogynist, and they get to the bottom of it kind of, and I kind of like that, how that went, even though it was so awkward for many episodes. Like, dude, come on, like back down a little, like don't laugh at her. What the hell are you doing?
Do you think Mazzaria? Do you think Mazzaria told Rhaenyra? Like, do you think they had that meeting and like they gabbed it up, and then Mazzaria's like, "Here, I got an idea for how to get this guy out of your hair. Like, fluff him up. Make
I like
him
the
feel
idea.
good."
Yeah, I do like the idea, because that's the kind of thing they might talk about in private, because she needs like a female ally that understands these things, you know.
Do you mean as far as sending him off to treat with Daemon?
No, just that approach. Well, that separately, I think she was talking about, but she's talking about just the approach in that council scene. Just then,
I'm
like
talking
they had
about
talked
sending him off just to go to Daemon specifically.
Oh, you were talking. My bad. Okay, I'm wrong.
Sending him to Daemon. Yes.
Okay.
The way,
like
which
maybe
is
Mazzaria did give her.
I think it's a brilliant strategy because, yeah, I mean, like, it's risky because, I mean, you definitely risk him betraying you or whatever. But ideally, really, what you're doing is you're trying to make him feel honored and important, and use his pushiness in your favor to go investigate Daemon, basically. Like, it seems smart unless it backfires, in which case it's really dumb.
I think that Mazzaria might have given her some pointers and like, here's some little bits of logic you can throw at them when they insult you or whatever. But also, I absolutely think that Mazzaria had her send him, because she says, have, things that you cannot do yourself, have others do for you. And I think we were mostly reading that as like, send Alinda to the city to spread propaganda. But that happened later. It was almost right after, when she tells her that she sends Alfred to go talk to Daemon. I think that's a very good point. That's what she was doing. Yeah.
So there is a little undertone there. The Shea brought up the potential of like a betrayal or something. He's like, oh, I would never join the High Towers. Like, okay, so that's not on the table probably, unless he's lying or something. But Daemon's like, I'm making my own claim. And he's like, he wouldn't dare. And she says, you know Daemon to lack for daring. So yeah, that's the person he could flip to. He might go to Daemon's side or something like that. And who knows? That's not necessarily something we think is coming, but it's said here as a possibility. So we want to mention it. And the fact that she is trying to get Daemon back on her side is interesting in and of itself. If they weren't at war, just like you talk about Aemond, she wouldn't be trying to repair her relationship with him, because he's just a bad husband and all this other stuff. She's like, she needs him as a military ally, not as, like, she wants to repair their relationship because the two are related, but she more needs him as an ally than she needs him as a husband. And
she needs his dragon.
Yes. And this is itself one of the many tragedies of war. It relentlessly and repeatedly pushes you to break your own code of ethics, the things you wouldn't do, that you're doing for survival or to win, or both, that you wouldn't do otherwise, like in a time of peace. Without war hanging over you, these decisions would be framed massively differently. I also wanted to add another angle to the gender thing here and how people are raised. It's an open question how Viserys would have raised his son if he had had one, because he was diplomacy first throughout his life. He wasn't a sword first kind of guy, even though there's plenty of flaws in how his reign went and how many.
He had one while he was healthy.
Yeah.
To be clear, because he obviously had many sons.
Right, like, sorry, you're right. Like if Balon had grown up, the one that he wanted at the time before he was infirm. Yeah, you're right. Good correction. Because Rhaenyra is like, oh, he gave me a cup instead of a sword, and it's like, well, he himself mostly wielded a cup instead of a sword. It's partly a gender thing. Yes, society always does that, but that's maybe the way he would have pushed his son too, his firstborn, the one that he expected to inherit before he got lazy about all that. Or maybe he just would have been lazy in the first place. But I think that's an interesting little thing to consider, is just Viserys himself wasn't really a sword first kind of guy. And that's an important thing to point to when you have not many examples of the peaceful men. I think Lionel Strong was another one, for example, but most of those people have been pushed aside now.
It is worth noting that while she had the cup, and maybe Viserys would have better trained a son at all, a diplomat, warrior, whatever, to whatever extent he would have wanted his son to be a cupbearer in the council room so that he could learn the goings-on of politics. When Rhaenyra tried to speak up, he shut her down twice. Would he have done that to his son? I don't know.
Maybe not.
Now, she did speak up saying send a dragon, so maybe he would have shut the son down if I don't want to send a dragon, be diplomatic.
That's true.
I don't know. It's hard to say, but...
So, just to reference A Song of Ice and Fire a bit, that's one last point on the whole male-female dichotomy in war. It's handled so well in A Song of Ice and Fire in the twins of Jaime and Cersei. Nothing expresses that better. They're the same family, born at the same time, and you see all the precise ways they're treated differently only because of that. Right? Cersei frequently thinks about how unfair it is. She's like, if I had a sword, actually, she often thinks if I had a cock, but whatever, same difference in her mind. She's kind of drank some of the Kool-Aid herself. It also comes up with Catelyn and Edmure to a lesser extent. Like, she was raised to be heir until Edmure was born. And Edmure was trained for war as soon as he was born, but Catelyn never was really. And that comes up in a few other places throughout the book. But that's probably a great topic for a greater discussion. But for now, I'll just tease it because I think it's a great parallel. So Mysaria, one last thing about Daemon, or about Alfred going to see Daemon. I guess that's just going to happen next episode, but wouldn't it be interesting if he gets there and Daemon's like somewhere else? He's out in the field. He's like over at Stone. He's like, oh, this place is huge. Oh, the work is going well. What's your name? Alys Rivers. Okay. What's your, No, they're not going to do that, but it would be, it would be neat if they had more time for things like that.
One thing I wonder if Alfred on the way there might get in trouble with the Riverlanders. They made a point of them doing it under a Targaryen flag.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's true.
And so if Alfred is riding through the Riverlands with a Targaryen flag, he might face some kind of retribution based on what.
Well, we saw him riding, and he wasn't carrying a flag. They were bannerless when they were riding, so I doubt they're doing that. Because you're right, that's not a good idea. That would attract the attention of the Greens too. So yeah, it's not a good idea. Yeah. They said they would try. He sent some men with him, but yeah, it really is again to consider the whole betrayal possibility, meaning that Alfred could flip to Daemon. Daemon says basically the same things that some of the others are saying. She says to Alys, he's like, look, they won't accept her as a leader. The men of her council. He's kind of predicting how Alfred and Bartimus and the other members are going to respond. It's not quite as bad as he thinks, though. They're accepting her more than he thought they would, but yeah.
It's also a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everyone says we can't accept her because no one's going to accept her, well, what if you all just accept her? Right?
Well, especially Daemon. If Daemon takes the lead in that, like he would set such a great example, but he didn't. Since
they won't accept her, I might as well not either.
Yeah.
Why not? Since they won't accept her, I need to make sure they do. Why isn't that his take?
Yeah.
And Amaz, it's not rhetorical. The answer is because he wants the power.
Yep.
He doesn't want them to accept her.
Yeah, he wants at least as much power as her, if not more. He's definitely that's at best. But we'll come back to that. Let's talk about Mysaria. She expresses the same frustration. She's like, Alfred actually has kind of a point. I didn't want to fully admit it, but we worked it out a little bit, and she says the path I trod has never been walked. She is, and that's true. There's a few ways to take that, but if you just think of it as the simple answer, there's never been a ruling queen before. Which, by the way, relates to Daemon's arguments about king or king consort or prince or whatever. There's no precedent for that either in this kingdom. They've never had a king consort. I actually kind of think Daemon is technically correct, but Simon is also right in a way, because people usually do just say queen when they mean dowager queen. They usually do just say queen when they say queen regent, but very often the full title is spelled out. Damon's like, oh, it's unnecessary. So, it depends. It's something.
Yeah, well, they don't say queen consort though. Is also the point. They'll say queen regent or queen dowager, but they don't say queen consort, and they are setting the standard for. They're setting the standard currently for what's going to be, normal. So I think he's right to push up against it. Except then he just takes it too far to be like, no, we're going to rule together. It's like, no, it's like. Whereas at first it makes you think that he's just saying the word isn't necessary. You're like, no, he thinks that he should have all the full rights. Actually,
yeah. Simon's reading into. He's a little worried what Daemon's actually saying there, which he probably is. But
can I also say you're talking
doesn't mean he's not technically correct.
Can I also say you were talking about how Rhaenyra has no model to work off of as a ruling queen. Which is why I think this scene happening here and the decision to have Meraxes' skull at Dragonstone is so brilliant, because it gives her all these scenes where she can ruminate and stare at the skull of the dragon of like the previous, like the closest that, you know, she's had to ruling queens are Rhaenys, Visenya, Alicent, right? Like, and they had a lot of power as queens, more than you would say Emma or Alicent. Maybe Alicent had a good amount of power because she was regent, but regardless.
Yeah, you're totally right. And, you know, we've seen her be interested in Visenya since season 1, episode 1. So yeah, it makes sense that she carried that forward even more when she was in a position of more full leadership.
You know, there was some question when Daemon and Simon Strong were first interacting about what quite the etiquette was. Is Daemon pushing too far, or is it a power grab, or is it? But and in this episode again, it's clear beyond just like what you call him. Like, he's told Alys Rivers, he didn't say he wanted to rule with Rhaenyra. He said, "I'm going to take the throne. She can join me if she wants."
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, she can join if she wants.
Clearly, at least right now. Like, some of this might be him building himself up.
There's some bluster, maybe a little bravado, perhaps. But
bluster, exactly, yeah. But he clearly has it in him. You know, however much, if he might sing a different tune if Rhaenyra was in front of him, we'll see. But he clearly has it in him to be just grabbing for power right now.
The biggest Daemon apologist would say something like, "Oh, he's just pretending that it's all for him because that's how he thinks everybody will follow him if it's for him, and then he'll just turn it all over to her." Yeah, I mean that's not very likely.
Except he's pretending to this woman in a castle who has no real role. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why is he pretending to her?
Yeah. So Mysaria, sticking with her, she's a pretty gray character. Her pro-commoner attitudes are praiseworthy, especially because there's not a lot of people doing that. But she's done some kind of heinous things, too. Here she asks for free hand to unleash her talents on King's Landing to stir up the populace, to do propaganda, to take advantage of Criston's mistake regarding Meleys. This probably isn't near as dark as Daemon giving Willem Blackwood license to, quote, do his worst, which we'll talk about later. But it's certainly a parallel to that. It's on a similar vibe, especially because the people of King's Landing are already in a very sorry state. They're already in a desperate state. Like, any sort of using them for political means is probably going to get some people killed. Some innocents are probably going to get caught up in it. At least they aren't the targets like the hapless Bracken commoners. So yeah, that's why it's pretty sure that's worse. But still, she wants permission to do the dirty things that Rhaenyra herself might not want to sign off on directly. Like Daemon says, there's certain things the crown must not be seen to do. This is very similar to that.
Yeah, lots of parallels here. This is one of them. We moved past Aegon laying in that bed, but I feel like that was a clear hearken to Viserys laying in the bed with his face all emaciated and bandages on. I think they're... Throughout the season, I think they're doing a lot to use one image to remind us, or one scene or line to remind us of another. This is definitely, there's this parallel between what Mysaria is asking for and what Daemon's doing.
Yep. Well said.
Which doesn't bode well for the people.
No, it does not. Yeah. So Rhaenyra agrees. She's like, yeah. It's also a little similar to Criston Cole saying, do you really want to preside over this part of the war? You know, maybe you don't want to know about some of this stuff. You know, she's like, no, I do want to know about it, but it's the same sort of, it's a similar vibe. Like, it's better if you don't know about these things. You know, we're going to do these for you, but yeah, let's keep your hands clean as much as possible. So she says, yeah, go ahead. And it's introduced in kind of an interesting way. You see that Rhaenyra's going to bed. She's, you know, washing her hands of it in a way, and the maid is brushing her hair, and she's like, and this is a different maid, though. It's almost like the maid isn't quite as good at it.
Well, we also see Alinda go off, and can I point out, we see a little Alinda's House Massey sigil on her dress.
Nice, yeah, she's got her sigil. Yeah, she's the daughter of one of the council members.
The Lyseni Orgy council member, her Gorman Massey, the uncouth one.
Yeah, the uncouth one, yeah. And so that's why Alinda wasn't brushing her hair, because she's infiltrating King's Landing. And they repeat the old pretend to be a prisoner trick that Daemon did with blood to get inside the castle. And, well, inside the castle in that case. Here it's just to get inside the city. Similar enough.
What? Pretend to be a prisoner?
Yeah, he grabbed her like she was a prisoner to bring her through.
Oh, okay. I guess he kind of grabbed her. I guess.
Yeah, like there wasn't any need to grab her if he was just going to lead her through the gate. I think he was trying to make her look like a prisoner. Anyway, I could be wrong about that, but it felt similar. Not important. And so clearly there's some gold cloaks that still like care about Mysaria, because he just mentions, like, I think he may have she must have recognized this guy or something. I don't know if she
that
just, like,
was my actually biggest question here, was how, like, she was looking for some sort of tell that would make it clear which gold cloak was on Myzaria's take. And so I was like, well, did she describe him? He seemed kind of generic. It was dark and rainy. I didn't seem to see any kind of obvious, like, he's got a pin on, like Laurie's had his Firefly guy had like a Firefly pin, you know, his agents had, like, which seems silly to me, to be clear, to have a marking you as like an agent. But either way, I don't know how she knew him.
all she has to do is know the schedule the guards are on. I don't think it's that complicated.
Yeah, you look for go to at this time we know this guard,
This guy
is
with
a
this
tall,
beard.
with
Yeah.
reddish beard.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree. It's a little not explained, but it's easy to explain. You know, if that makes sense.
Something else that I almost wish they would show sometimes, but he might have had a certain rank. He might have been like a lieutenant or a sergeant or something.
Yes,
so whatever
that's a good point.
sergeant is at the East Gate at 9 p.m. or whatever.
Yeah. Either way, she goes inside she gets inside the city, and we see her walking around a bit. She maneuvers around a few alleys here and there, walking through the rain. And she goes to see Deanna. In case you didn't recognize her, that's the same girl that was raped by Aegon in season 1. And we saw her working at the bar where Ulf's scene took place. She got spanked by one of Ulf's friends. I don't know if that's really his friend, just compadre guy. I don't know. Anyway, obviously Deanna's no friend to the Greens. So it's kind of, you can just see without knowing what's going to happen. You're like, okay, well, I can see why she's on their side, you know, or would be on their side. And they clearly know each other. Linda is recognized right away. So there you go. That seems very interesting, but we don't exactly know where it's going just yet. Any other things?
I did not take the Deanna clearly knew Alinda. I guess she would know from working in the Red Keep, but I didn't take it that she knew her like through Mysaria necessarily. She just knew someone's at my door. I'm gonna let them in.
I'm pretty sure she said her name when she opened the door. She's like, Alinda.
I'll have to check. I don't remember that.
Pretty
part.
sure that happened because she didn't say Deanna. I think it was the other way around. It was the saying Alinda.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I didn't think either of them said anything, so I'll have to go back and check. That's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense. If Deanna worked, you know, around there, she could know Alinda, but it's just...
But they both worked in the castle together.
Yeah.
Man, you're right. I mean, it's pretty easy to imagine a connection between them because they both worked at the Red Keep.
They're both about to find out one way or the other.
Yeah, that's true. And so are we. So will we get any clarification that may or may not be necessary?
That would be cool to see a scene with just these two. I kind of expect us to just like see her out doing her tasks, but I would like them to talk. That would be cool.
Yeah, and this episode maybe gave us more hope for some of that. I think we all maybe thought the loss of 2 episodes, thanks to HBO making this an 8-episode season instead of 10, would unfortunately, those would be some of the casualties, would be some of the scenes with the least or lesser main characters, ones who aren't the central characters. So yeah, that might be, this episode actually gave us a lot of that. You know, we got Jace and Bela and these characters, like we got this scene right here that we hopefully get more of.
And we got Hugh.
Yeah, true that. True Hugh. Let's talk about Driftmark.
I just want to say, I'll save it till closer to the end, but I have a bold take. I have a hot take, a bold prediction. So.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's we'll have a perfect chance for that at the end. I believe I know sort of where you're going with it, so we'll see. Driftmark. Corlys shows his grief standing in front of the Driftwood throne. His castle is a tomb. He says he's amongst all his treasures, but none of it matters without her. Bela kind of points this out, suggests that, yeah, you did all this stuff. You went here, you went there, you were this great adventurer. Very few people knew it was all for her, which like gets a reaction out of him. He starts to sob a little more. And it's this great shot of high tide in the distance at night. You can see it kind of off behind them. Like the tide is in probably, so you can't walk to it. It's that great thing there. We've only seen it during the day before. She offers him the job, and he at first takes it as a burden rather than an honor, which is how Bela reframes it. And it's really, really amazing. And like I said at the beginning, she just expertly dissects his argument, knows exactly what buttons to push to get him to flip his position. She's like, no, this isn't a burden. It's a chance to carry on the goal your wife died for. What better way to honor her than by carrying the torch that she dropped, that she was wielding for her queen, that she died for that cause. That's the best thing you can do for her memory is to complete that job that she set out to do. And Bela points out, look, man, your grief has been costly to your family in the past. Don't do that again. It's very direct and very authoritative, and she's proud of it, you know, or he's proud of her for saying it. She says, Rhaenys died in Dragonfire, as a Targaryen should, as she herself wants to. And that really moves Corlys, and he's like, whoa, this is a good person to be my heir. But she's like, nope, blood and fire. You need salt and sea for your heir. So I think at that moment he was seeing Rhaenys in her, that fire, that speaking along the same terms and saying the things that clearly did reflect what his wife was likely feeling in those final moments and building up to that. How can he let his grandchildren and other kin fight while he sits back and doesn't? In an episode where so few people have experience in war, in an episode where much is made over how war is a man's game, how is this man going to sit back while the women in his family go fight and die? Especially the woman that he loved most of all in this world. So
he's a very progressive thinker.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. There's a whole lot to say about this scene in terms of lore or analysis, other than it was great and it said everything it needed to say. His apparent turn is very believable given how good her argument and acting was. And I do think that's what he's doing there. The visual storytelling, he closes his hand around the pin. I think that's acceptance. If he sets it aside or like tosses it, I think that's pretty clearly like, no. Is that how you read it too, Sean?
For sure. Yeah. He didn't put it back in the box, just throw it in the sea or anything. He embraced it, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think this scene does a lot to capture the theme of this episode. The title was Regent. And if a regent is someone serving in the place of someone else, think of how pervasive that is through the whole episode. Like, Daemon is basically trying to be the king himself instead of Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra sent her on her behalf to talk to Corlys about being the regent, and in her absence, you'll be the hand. We'd see Aemond becoming the regent. It's a very constant theme of someone filling the role of someone else. This episode is all about that.
A very good point. Yeah, very good. Yeah, so it's a really powerful scene. I think a lot of people were moved by it, and certainly one of the ones that's been outlined a lot, but we also did give it a little bit of talk at the beginning. Shout out Bethany Antonia for sure. Moving on to her sister, the Vale. We get a brief scene here. It's our first time seeing Lady Jane. It was good to have a moment there. A bit of a debate, more lawyering, kind of like how I referred to Bela's speech to Corlys as like an expert closing argument. This is more of a debate over the fine print. Like, you said you wanted a dragon, you got one. I said I wanted a dragon for defense. This dragon cannot do that, you know? And it doesn't really get resolved, the argument, but for now, 15,000 troops, probably not marching yet. Rhaenyra asked for this help, but it doesn't look like it's coming yet. And she brings up Vhagar. She's like, look, Vhagar brought us to heel during the conquest. This is the one thing we are afraid of up here. We're afraid of Vhagar again. And I was like, well, I'm not sure we can really help you with that. But we can, even if we sent a bigger dragon, it won't be bigger than Vhagar. But any thoughts on this scene, Sean? It seems like it's setting up more. It obviously didn't do a whole lot, but I'm glad we got it, and I'm curious what's next.
Yeah, I wonder how long she'll linger there, waiting for the troops to be committed, because she's supposed to move on to Pentos. Is she supposed to just automatically move on to Pentos no matter what, or wait till this gets resolved? Does she go back home if it doesn't get resolved? There's a lot hanging here. So
agreed. Yeah, so it's kind of up in the air for now, like the Eyrie itself. Ayo. Now,
I will say there was one other interesting bit here that they seem to be sort of at odds. And Lady Jane is in a tough spot. Like, you expect me to commit these troops, but you understand, like, it could be the end of my people if I do, you know, like a dragon might, if I do that, a dragon really might come and burn this castle down. So it is a legit concern that she has. But despite this sort of contention between them, there was still that moment of bonding, you know, like, I don't like feeling powerless. Me neither. You know, I think they have that in common, and hopefully they can grow somewhere from that.
Yeah, I really appreciated Jane for not just like shooting the messenger, like she realizes this is an emissary. She didn't make this decision, which brings me to something I expected her to bring up, but makes sense to me now why maybe she wouldn't if Jane isn't the type to just blame this young girl for something that's not her fault. Well, as we mentioned before, Daemon is not beloved in the Vale. He killed his wife, Rhea Royce, and was outright accused of it. You know what I mean? So like, it's no secret. Like it's a clear rumor that he's done it, but Jane doesn't seem to bring anything about that up to Rhaena. If Daemon comes up more and like is raising people, and Jane and Rhaena had a conversation, maybe it would come up then, though.
It could. And another factor here that Sean, you might not be aware of, and I want to clarify for anybody else that doesn't know, is Jane is Rhaenyra's cousin, but not the cousin of the Hightower side of the family, because it's Viserys' wife that is the part Aaron. So that's the connection. So of course, Emma is Rhaenyra's connection to the Vale. Obviously, Alicent's children don't have that because they have Hightower on that side, and yeah. So that's part of it. That's maybe something else that's helping keep Jane on their side a little bit. Also, the whole women can rule part, which is relevant to a lady of the Vale.
Yeah, she's the ruling lady of the Vale. She is like, there's no like young child that she's regent for. She is the lady.
Yeah, it's an important clarification because not only is that the situation at the Conquest that she refers to, where there was a Aaron regent woman ruling for her son who was 6 or 7, but that's also the scenario in A Song of Ice and Fire where we have Lysa Arryn ruling for Sweet Robin. Now, the Twins, a familiar place. This is the Riverlands is really expanding. We get quite a few more Riverlords, more Alys Rivers, so a Rivers lady, and more Harrenhal. And the Twins is one of the most familiar places meaning that we've already seen, that we're seeing for the first time in the show. Doesn't have the most fond memories, though, does it? Still, it's an interesting place. Jace, he's much better at this than Daemon so far, isn't he? At first, he thinks to head to Harrenhal to basically do what Sir Alfred is sent to do, but changes his mind when he realizes the value of the phrase and the crossing and what that'll mean for the Northern March. A look at the map shows exactly what he means. If the Greybeards want to get to Riverrun, which is where he wants them to go to block the Lannister forces that are going to eventually come through, well, they have to go through the Twins Crossing and go south, just like half of Robb's army did, the one that was sent to relieve Riverrun during the War of Five Kings. If they had to go the long way, it's really long. They have to go all the way around the whole Trident. It's like 4 times longer. So at the time, Robb Stark paid a hefty toll. And this is similar. There's no marriage to ask for this time. There's no hand to give. Jace is already spoken for. Joffrey's already spoken for. Maybe they could ask for little Viserys or little Aegon, but, it's little babies getting married. They didn't go there. Maybe they don't have children of that age. These two don't look that young. They probably don't have young children. Lord Forrest Frey says, "It is death to bear steel against one's liege. A line also delivered by Robb Stark to the Great John, who was last seen captive at the Twins. So, like Lady Jane, Lady Frey, who we'll discuss in a second, because there's some dispute over who she is, like what her name is, but hang on, we'll come back to that. Also says they fear Vhagar. Fair point. But Jace, like I said, pretty good at negotiating, has a good comeback. He says, look, my dragon's right over there. And yes, I'll protect you. And so will my uncle. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that's good, but what about our price? And he's like, okay, you can have Harrenhal, but it's going to take more than a crossing if you want that. And you got to send your troops too. Jace probably overpaid a little bit, but it's good. They really needed that. It's very valuable to them, and it's worth more to them than it is to the Greens, probably. So, yeah, a really good scene. I like seeing Jace in action. He's a good negotiator. Again, he's gotten the Vale, sort of, the North, and now the Twins, in the time that Daemon has made things worse for his own cause. Right? So, gotta like that. Jace, on the up here. What do you think about the scene, Sean?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting scene. It was, I don't have much to say beyond what you said, but I do appreciate the view, the above imagery of the bridge across, and them sitting there at the table. I got a vibe from Is that woman's name Sabbatha? Is that right?
Well, we're not sure. That's the
We're
thing.
gonna
Hold
talk
off
about
on
this.
that.
Okay. I know the subtitles called him Forest Frey.
That's correct. Yes, that
yeah.
one's correct.
But anyway, she reminded me of Olenna Tyrell a little bit. She
Mm.
seemed to be very bold and opinionated,
And she did most of the talking. They exchanged several looks, but mostly it was her looking at him, and she did the talking. He said a few things, but yeah, she seemed more in control there, or more in command. And maybe she's the better negotiator, but yeah, I agree with you. There's a little bit of that vibe there. So yeah, let's talk about the name thing. This is a little weird. Ashaya, why don't you explain it?
Yeah, so basically, often when characters are credited, it comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes it's from an actor's CV. Sometimes it's like a leak, like someone reports on something. Sometimes it's from the credits, and sometimes it's from the subtitles, the captions. Sometimes it's wrong, all of these things. Well, yes, Forrest is credited as Forrest in the caption, and so it seems that is Forrest, if that's correct. Lady Frey before the season was credited as Lady Serena. The Wiki of Westeros has updated their listing calling her Sabbatha, but on the Wiki discussion notes, someone asks, why did we change this? Why do we assume that Serena's a code name and not her name? And there's no response currently. So I personally can't find the source for why she is Sabbatha, other than that she is a woman who is married to a Lord Forrest Frey, but she is a bit older than we would imagine.
The book version of Sabbatha, to be clear, is a good bit younger, so this is why we're wondering partly why.
The book version of Sabbatha is a bit of a fighter, and this woman isn't a bit of a fighter, but she is kind of in control like this Lady Frey is. So I think there's elements that you could see, but for me, the jury is very much still out on whether A, Lady Serena is Lady Sabbatha, and B, whether her existence means there's no Sabbatha, the canonical book Sabbatha, who plays a few roles. And I could see Lady Frey here filling some of those roles, but not others. And we're going to talk about this on Saturday and Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's just curious in general that they would use a code name for something. Like, why would be like, Sabbatha? That's not some major character that people are going to freak out over.
I think she just is Lady Serena. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have suspicions.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's not a huge topic, but it's developing situation. This name.
It's part of the history of Westeros.
Yes, that's right. The uncertainty over this name is part of the folklore of the show, shall we say. Bracken and Blackwood, let's talk about that. Looks like Stonehenge in the background we actually might get to see, which is interesting. We haven't gotten a shot of that before. Lord Amos defies Daemon, and it impresses him. This actor reminds me of Sean Bean. Apparently, by the way, that Davos Blackwood who died at the Battle of Burning Mill was Willem's brother, and Daemon played this so badly. His ignorance of Riverland's politics is really on display. Remember when he asked, why do the Brackens and Blackwoods hate each other? Who can tell which is which? Yet he hears that they both hate each other. Yet he's trying to make one submit to the other. That's never going to have the worst thing. He's like, you were trying to get two people or two houses that have hated each other for thousands of years, one to bend the knee to the other. It's so bad. It's just never going to work. And this is a throwback to Jaime at Raventree Hall. Remember this at the end of A Dance with Dragons? Raventree Hall was holding out. They refused to submit to the Brackens. But once Jaime shows up, it's like, well, we'll submit to you. I'll submit to the king, not Jonas Bracken. And they're like, he's like, I understand. It's like, good. All right, then. and that settles it. So very poorly handled by Daemon.
If everything had been the same except Willen wasn't there, I think you would have got him to side with him.
Yeah, if he had said, submit to me. He said, submit to me instead of the Black. Yeah, and you're right. Even bringing the Blackwood was dumb.
His presence ruined the whole thing.
Yeah. So, but again, he's impressed. They're like, I go ahead and burn me then. And he's like, dang, I need guys like that on my side. It was like,
because you're going to get burned by one dragon or the other. So.
Yeah, I need dudes that are strong enough to stand up to that. Yeah, I love his line. He says, I'd rather be the Lord of Bones and Cinders. It's the Lord of Bones. Remember Rattle Shirt there? And it's maybe the shot of the episode. Did you think he was going to burn him, Sean?
Yes, I did. I thought that...
He thought he was going to board.
And I feel weird saying this, but I almost feel like he should have.
Really?
Because on some level, they might be calling his bluff. And if he burns this guy, this leader and a few others, the other people might be like, all right, I guess he really will burn us. We have to do this. Maybe not. Maybe they still are that against it, but now there's no way they will. All right, I don't know what in the world Daemon can do now. He's in such an awful situation.
He's dug himself quite a hole. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I have some ideas on what he might do next. Well, that's another topic for Saturday.
I do appreciate it is a notch up for him and my expectations of him that he didn't burn him.
Only for him to turn to something worse right after.
Exactly, right? Like
right.
That he didn't burn him, and that he realized that it was valuable that they were that brave. But then the plan he comes up with is, doggone, that's, it would have been, I don't want him to burn these guys, but I'd rather him burn these trained soldiers putting themselves in harm's way, trying to stand by some principle based on jealousy, than these guys' innocent wives and children.
Oh yeah,
right? Like
easy call. Yeah, a terrible choice, but an easy choice if you're given it. Yeah. So Daemon tells Blackwood to do his worst. Telling the Blackwoods to do the worst to the Brackens is pretty horrifying to imagine. This is verified later. The scale and scope of what they do. This is a smaller scale version of Tywin unleashing Gregor, Vargo Hoat, and Amory Lorch on the Riverlands. And of course, all four of those men controlled Harrenhal for a brief stint and died. It's all, again, this reminds me of Duskendale, but we covered that already. Daemon is going to be upset with the Blackwoods, though. Like he said, certain things the crown can't be seen to do, and they carry Targaryen banners. Like he kind of betrays Daemon. It's like, whoa, this guy's like a scoundrel. Like what's going on here? So this is a developing situation too.
I mean, he killed Gerald Bracken over a pretty mild thing
when he was like 10. Yeah, it was a violent child.
He is a scoundrel. He's black of heart, I would say. I don't know. I think this series has done a great service to the Brackens to leveling out the playing field in terms of, I think there's more Bracken fans than ever before.
yeah, definitely.
We did an episode on the Brackens and the Blackwoods not too long before the season started, right?
Yeah.
And that was a realization I came to, that probably people who, as deep in it, read the books multiple times, came to this realization long ago. But it seems pretty consistently in every appearance of the Blackwoods, they're somewhere between honorable and or on the winning side. And almost every instance of the Brackens are somewhere between dishonorable and the losing side.
Yes.
Now, regardless, they are both at fault for this ageless feud, right? Even if one side is the good guys and one's the bad guys, it takes two to tango. So the Blackwoods have to be doing something wrong to still be embroiled in this feud. But all the characters that were presented seem to be presented in a positive light. And this is a big juxtaposition from from book canon. So
I agree with Shay, even though I favor the Blackwoods, even without the authorial thumb on the scale. I agree with Shay that I approve of some balancing here. Because, the Brackens just look better. They look better all around. They're both the victims and the tough ones. At the same time, they look strong and they suffered for being virtuous.
Although that Bracken that Willem killed in season 1, he was kind of a bully.
Yeah, he was a bully. He didn't deserve to die. But
he didn't deserve to be murdered. He was very rude all around.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and his
definitely.
father was cheering him on. It didn't seem like his father was really setting a good example.
No, he wasn't. I agree with that. So Daemon obviously isn't any better than Willem Blackwood here. He gives the order to do this, and it's like his second oopsie war crime. He's like, I didn't mean to do. Oh, I mean, Jaehaerys, it was a mistake. I didn't know. Yeah, and he tries to escape responsibility for both, and neither work. He doesn't escape responsibility first. He doesn't, and in trying to escape responsibility for this second thing, they throw the first one back in his face. But we'll come back to that in a minute, because that's one of the last scenes of the episode, and we have a lot of Harrenhal to talk about before that point. Work has progressed. Daemon orders the levying of farmers, quote, from Antlers to High Heart, which is a fun call out because High Heart is a nice tie-in to the lore, especially with Alys Rivers. Well, primarily about Alys Rivers. Last episode, I talked about how much this castle was turning into a fear and loathing in Harrenhal situation, and the Bat Country aspect of that has been further explained. Sir Simon says there's so much shit in the Wailing Tower that the halls are impassable. Now, if Westeros were technologically farther along, they could use this as an explosive. Bat guano used to be used in the making of gunpowder before technique got a little better. It's also used in other explosive items, and it's also great as fertilizers. I mean, they should just be shoveling that out into their fields. But there's actually a Texas town called Blowout. It got its name from a cave that was so filled with bat guano that the ammonia buildup inside it exploded when the cave mouth was struck by lightning. So that renamed the town to Blowout. Yeah, that's right. Isn't that amazing? Like, where did you find that, Aziz? You looking up bat guano on your spare time? You looking up cave blowout? What is going on here?
You're just a real big fan of Texas.
Yeah, that would be quote unquote funny if that's part of how the arson of Lionel and Harwin was facilitated. With like, yeah, just pile up the bat guano and set it on fire. Now Harrenhal still has the Fear and Loathing vibe, but it also has the Field of Dreams vibe. If you build it, they will come. But the Riverlords aren't coming. They did come, but they left angrily after yelling at him. So it didn't quite go. They did come, but then they left right away. I love how he says, "Let no man say Daemon Targaryen didn't dirty his hands." Like, don't worry, bro. We know your hands are dirty. Your hands are very dirty. But like the Field of Dreams ghosts, let's talk about that some more again before the Riverlords arrive, because Alys Rivers sort of paves the way for their appearance by saying some of the same things, like less harshly, but more supernaturally, and with all sorts of mysterious elements throughout. The Greens have a dreamer, Helena, but not a green dreamer. Now that is a parallel on the black side, at least in Daemon's corner of the story. She's a dreamer and kind of leads him into his own dreams. So we're seeing that. And of course, it's interesting too how Simon is often the one that brings him back out. It's often his voice that Daemon hears to bring him back out of something. Like Simon's like, hey, there's a raven here. Or did you like, is the duck not to your liking? Yeah, it's often his voice that brings him back out, which I don't know there's anything to read into that, but keep an eye on that pattern. Maybe there's something going on there.
I gotta say, remember last episode, I was wondering how aware he was of these supernatural type things, or Alice's connection to it, or what his relationship was with her. And I this episode that had a lot more of her, pay more attention. She hasn't interacted with anyone other than Daemon. And this might be a little tinfoily. I don't really expect this. But it makes me wonder if she's just completely a figment of his imagination? Is this all just his inner guilt haunting him somehow?
Well, we see Simon look at her pretty distinctly, I would say to that.
Yeah.
In a
shot
I'll put right here.
Also, Joe Magician, I talked about this with Joe Magician. He says there's a scene where in the first scene in Harrenhal, or the second episode with Harrenhal, where he also interacts with her. Also, how does his hand get wrapped?
Well, yeah, but now
you
the thing
can wrap
is,
your own hand technically, like
I guess, yeah.
But
yeah,
still,
because if he can wake up at dinner thinking he was just having sex, he can also wrap his hand.
Okay, that's a fair point. Yeah,
and I'm not pushing too hard for this, but I do. But my other a slightly more specific thought along this, maybe that not so much that she just doesn't even exist, but the way he looks at her reminded me a little about how Daemon looked at the servant girl who he saw as his dead wife.
And it turned
which adds again, how does Simon Strong perceive her? Is he also seeing weird visions? Is he also struggling with his sanity? Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, it makes some sense. And you're not
everyone around her.
Since you're not the only person to have that theory, that by itself suggests they might be going for that. They might be trying to maybe make us think that. Whether it's true or not, of course, we'll let it play out more. But yeah, she's a fascinating character regardless, and they have multiple scenes together in this episode, which I love. Like, more Daemon and Alice scenes are okay by me.
I have a question, too.
Sure.
Those three guys that always seem to be at the table with Simon
Those
Strong,
are his sons.
His sons.
Yeah.
We know
names?
a couple of their names based on
Larry, Moe, and Curly?
Well, apparently one is Paxter and the other is Germond.
Or Germond or German. Yeah, I don't know how to say that either.
I don't know how you say that name. But
and then another one.
And then there's the third. I don't know the third, but we know two of the names, and I'm not sure. I also, in digging through the wiki, couldn't quite find the source for one of the names. The other one was from Redanian intelligence reporting on it, and they often just get like leaked stuff. But either way, Redanian has reported Serena and reported Paxter, but I didn't see them say German. I don't know where they got that name.
Interesting. I love that scene where they're like, up. He's like, up. The one who just doesn't notice. He's like, just.
Oh my gosh, he's still.
Yeah, he's just eating his food. Yeah. So one of the cool things about Alys is she's, like I said, she's a fascinating character on many levels. For example, she's literally on a higher level than him in the scene where she's on that balcony. This is that same balcony that Daemon got to when he first arrived in his reign and armor, and he's staring down over, because that's the overlook of the Great Council there. And this is a really cool shot because you see her POV of it, and this is such a cool moment. He's chopping wood, and as the axe lands, he hears, it's like he struck some woman. There's a screaming sound, and it's the Bracken commoners is the implication here. And he looks up and looks back, and it's like he looks right to her, like he knows that she's there. And it's like she's sending the visions to him, or opening his mind to be able to hear the whispers on the wind that she herself is hearing, which she confronts him about later. She's like, I've heard these sounds. And he's like, oh, news? And she's like, news? No, I just hear these things on the wind, and smiles like, and he's like, okay. She basically keeps telling him, look, yo, I'm magical, and I'm going to prove it to you, but give you just enough doubt that you might be able to believe I'm not. He's not 100% accepting it, but he's not 100% rejecting it either, I think. Maybe that's the vibe, right? What do you think about that?
Well, I can also say someone points out something I don't think you mentioned here. Isn't that when he also hears screams?
Oh, I did say that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say it.
Yeah. And so this is the very much in line with what we know about how the old gods work. They captured the vibe of things that are in the books extremely well here. There's two connections to old gods magic that we're familiar with. One is that specific language of whispers on the wind, words on the wind, things like that. That is 100% how Bran hears things when he's trying to speak to his father, and when his father sort of maybe hears him through the heart tree through time. And Theon, same thing. Theon thinks the heart tree is whispering his name, and he's like, he describes it as a whisper on the wind, a rustle in the leaves. The same language is used. So it's very much a tight connection to Bran and Greenseer magic. The second one is the prior mentioned High Heart. Ghost of High Heart, of course, is the reference there. The Ghost of High Heart, which Arya sees twice. The Brotherhood Without Banners goes there twice during her storyline of Clash and Storm. She lives in a weirwood grove that was put to the axe, not unlike what Alys Rivers says Harrenhal is built on or near. It was a weirwood grove that was put to the axe, and that's the reason for the curse. Same concept, right? And she's like a news ticker of events when they go to visit her, even more so than Alys is here. It's more supernatural in the book. The Ghost of High Heart drops way more prophecies than Alys Rivers does here. It's like 15 to 20 things. A maid with purple serpents in her hair, a crow perched on a bridge with a raven on its shoulder, or a dripping seaweed on it, whatever. I'm not getting them exactly right, but you remember, there's so many of them, and they're all accurate. They're 100% accurate, every single one of them. We've been through this, right? It's the Ghost of High Heart doesn't say a single thing that's wrong. You can misinterpret them, but they're all pretty straightforward, and they're all right. So this is very much a crossover to that. The trees whispered her, and either Daemon has been granted the ability to hear some of those voices, or Alys is like through the drink, or Alys is like pushing it into his head a little bit, or a little of both. I don't know. The supernatural mechanism isn't necessarily the most important thing for us to zone in on, but something's going on there, no doubt. Perhaps the biggest evidence of her magical ability is bringing up his mother. Right? Now, the fact that she died young is public information, but how did she know to say that, given he had just been dreaming about her? That's the part that's like, that's not a coincidence, right? That would be a crazy coincidence. Maybe there's a chance it is, but that's a big one, right? So we'll talk about the actual Oedipus dream separately in a minute here, but I just want to talk about Alys's side of this. What did this mean to you, Sean? That mention of his mother?
Yeah, it definitely got his attention, but then they were immediately interrupted by Simon Strong coming in. So it made me wonder, something I'm not sure about is how did his mother die?
Oh, of complications from childbirth.
Okay, yeah. Of a
They would have had another brother. He died too.
Viserys and
Daemon, yeah.
Daemon. They didn't have any other sisters or they didn't have any other siblings. They would have, but the
Not
child
through
and the mom
Alyssa.
died.
If Ulf is right that he's a bastard
True.
of Balon the Brave, then they have a half brother named Ulf.
Good point.
But
Get outta
not
here,
necessarily.
Get out of here, Ulf. I love that. So there is some of that, like I said, some of that's public knowledge, but yeah, it's crazy that she knows that, knows to say that. Yeah, you're right. You're right that it's a developing situation. It's borrowing another trick from George. Something supernatural happens and then it's interrupted before it's fully explained. Yeah. So they're like, oh, they did that George trick, dang it. So I'm sure that maybe I'm not sure, but I think we're going to progress with that. We're surely not done with Alys Rivers, and we're even more sure we're not done with Daemon.
Yeah, it's like not only does she ask about his mother, but in the scene that happens of him eating there, she looks at him, as you see on the screen, like she looks at him very like as if she is waiting to see what he's tripping on.
To be fair, everybody else appears to be staring at him too in this scene, but you're right. She stares even more. She's the first one to look and the last one to look away, I think, if I remember right.
I also want to point out I don't know how much meaning there was behind it specifically, but when they're going back and forth between the duck or goose, I prefer goose. Wasn't that the conversation between Laenor and Rhaenyra when they were being betrothed?
They're debating which to serve.
Some people prefer duck or whatever.
I didn't catch that. That might be that's a good catch, I guess, Sean.
Yeah, I don't know if it matters.
Right.
Damon's hiding his latent homosexual urges.
I just thought it was a reference to Duck, Duck, Goose. They were. That's why the one guy didn't stand up at the right time.
There's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, so many layers. Look at the depth is incredible here. Yeah. So
one other little minor note, by the way, as far as I could tell, it's hard to know what they intended with the editing, but when he's talking to Alys and Simon Strong comes in, she kind of steps away. He looks at her. She steps behind him, but then they go back and forth between Simon and Daemon, but she doesn't appear again. I don't know if she left the room or she's just standing in a corner. Is she privy to overhear everything? Simon doesn't seem to be worried about talking about, messages to the king. Alice is in a room for.
I thought she was just walking out as he walked in. Like
you just don't see her exit. Yeah. You don't see her leave. And I'm extra thinking about it because it's so odd the way Daemon turns with an axe and points it right at Simon, but ostensibly Alys is right behind him. He's pointing the axe at her too. I
just don't see it. I think she left that room. I think we see her walk out and she left. I think you're reaching.
He tells her war is a terrible thing. He's like, yeah, this is just how war works. And sort of right, but mostly not. She says, this isn't war. This is, just depredations on the innocents. Once again, in the name of power, it's the weak and women who must endure, she says. And any upright man would repudiate the deeds that she's hearing of. Of course, he responds that he's not an upright man and passes the buck, like as so many times happens in this episode. He's like, well, you think I'm bad? Wait till you meet Aemond. You better hope you don't. He's worse, And given his attitude towards Strongs, Daemon might actually be right for the wrong reasons. But the more immediate point is she says, well, I heard the same thing about you before you got here. He could argue that, well, I haven't done that. I haven't killed you or done any of these things, but it's not much better. And then she needles him regarding Rhaenyra. She's like, surely the queen has approved your strategy, right? Right? And he's like, and that's when he again passes the buck. He's like, they won't follow her. They won't. It's not going to work. That method won't work. Blah, 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 blah. So again, he's bad argument.
That method won't work. And I'll see to it. I'll make sure it doesn't work.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a parallel here to Vale and Corlys winning someone over by trying to get them to look at themselves. But Daemon it's a lot harder to do that with Daemon. He's a lot stubborner, even though he's having these dreams that are doing all these things. Like his conscience is absolutely barking at him and his guilt is flaring up quite a bit. But yeah, he's not there. So
I don't want to pull anything spoilery out, but just generally speaking, I assume in the book, there's no way they get into Daemon's head like this.
No,
right? There's no way some maester knows that Alys Rivers gave him some hallucinogenic. This is all like and it's not a complaint. I love this, but this is show canon, if you will.
Yeah,
right?
it explicitly says that it doesn't appear that she had much effect on Daemon, which we don't have to read as truth, but it's like one line away. It's hardly said at all. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of expansion of this part of the story from the book, because it's just not very it's not very expanded in the first place. It's rather short. It's efficient, shall we say? It left a lot of room for expansion, and this is that expansion. As Alicent is our window into the escalation of the Green's depredations, Alys is our window into that side of the Blacks, which for now is mostly Daemon, with an assist from Willem Blackwood. And here come the angry Riverlords. This scene begins as if it's going to be another dream. For like the third episode in a row, he hears and sees like marching and light below his door. This time it's actually a person. It really is Simon Strong this time knocking on his door.
This was so good. I love a good inversion of like your expectations like that. I love that as a style in filmmaking and anything like that. It's just very, very humorous and effective.
Yeah, you totally think, oh, here comes another dream. We've had so many of them. It's like, oh no, it's someone's waking up in the middle of the night. It's really happening. And again, it's Simon kind of, that's the pull you out of dream mode, like maybe it's a sign that he's kind of immune to those dreams in the first place.
At least one, maybe a couple of these times when he's in this half dream state, he comes to reality at dinner, right?
Yeah,
and
true.
So he's like, is it time for pudding now?
Yeah.
Like it's almost,
that was a good joke.
He's almost accepted that he's in the middle of another dream.
Yeah, he's like, is this dinner? Yeah, am I at dinner now? Yeah, he doesn't even know where he is. You're right. And so a delegation arrives in the night, and I get being grumpy and woken up in the middle of the night, and he's like, what are you doing here? But he doesn't think at all about why they might be here. It's not a good reason. So, but maybe he does realize that, and so he's like, well, I'm going to attack. I'm going into attack mode. I'm not going to let them come at me. I'm going to try to shame them for waking their king in the middle of the night. I'm your Targaryen master. Is this really how you treat me? And they're like, we're not having any of that nonsense. Shut up and listen to us. Alys was kind of the good cop, like, you're doing bad things here, man. They're just like, you suck. You are awful. We have the following Riverlords: Lord Derry, Lord Peter Piper, Lord Peter Piper, that's from the book. Peter Piper picked, no, we won't go there, but that's the name. Lady Mallister and Wallace Mooton. Wallace Mooton, also directly from the book.
Seems like they've swapped Lord Jorah Mallister to be a Lady Mallister. Sometimes genders get swapped. It happened in Game of Thrones. Here we have that here again. Yeah,
you're right. That does happen. I'd forgotten about Jorah Mallister. Good call. So they accuse him of sending Willem Blackwood to commit atrocities against Bracken commoners. He's like, I didn't do that. And they're like, yo, they had black and red Targaryen banners. How are you going to deny that? He's like, oh, what the hell? That surprises him, which is surprising to us too. He's very back-footed by that, but he still tries to get the upper hand in the conversation, but it's just not happening. He's like, you're a baby killer. And he's like, whoever said that? I want to have them brought before me. He's like, well, the whole half the realm's saying it, man. And he just says that with absolutely no conviction, right? And they call him a tyrant to his face and storm out. I bet you just really appreciated that, didn't you, Sean?
Well, they're kind of indirectly calling Rhaenyra a tyrant. I wondered how much they meant to be calling him a Rhaenyra. How much do they know or believe that he's there on her behalf?
Good point.
I don't know. Either way, it's not good. Either way, it's a really bad situation. And his I don't know, his defense is, you can't prove that. Like, I wasn't supposed to get caught doing these bad things. There's not remorse for the bad things, both morally or strategically. It's just crap. I'm caught. That's his only regret.
He's so red-handed, seems, kind of like he was in that dream before.
Yeah.
And so he's pretty much what they say he is. They're pretty much everything they say is pretty accurate. And as he said himself to Alys, he's not an upright man, so he has to agree, kind of has to agree with them. You got me. So, and his plan, as he told Alys, was, I'll treat them fairly once they follow. And she's like, are you sure you want an army of people who hate you, who will turn on you as soon as they get a chance? He's like, well, once they see how I treat them fairly, they won't turn on me anymore because once we get going, it's like, but now they're not even going to follow you. Is how it looks.
They're not
like,
even going to get to that point.
Yeah. So
I will point out that even Simon Strong seems to be wavering a little bit.
Yeah.
Not only there was like the payment thing.
Mm-hmm.
Damon's like, I'll take care of it. So I was like, all right, well, we'll see. Like,
will
we're
you?
not going to have food, dude. I'm telling you. And then he gets the insisted to call him king.
Yeah.
And now here comes news of what seems to be Daemon terrorizing the pot. Like Simon is kind of stuck in the castle with them, so he has to kind of keep being his ally. But I don't know if he's gonna, when it comes to it. Daemon is not rallying the troops. He's not.
No, he's not. He is not rallying the troops.
He's turning them away, if anything.
So an interesting thing to catch here is he actually, before this happens, and Strong tells him that the Brackens have submitted to the Blackwoods, he's like, all right, send for Will and Blackwood. I want to congratulate him. So he's already on his way, apparently, but this is before he learns that he betrayed him by flying his banners, which maybe we'll get an explanation on why he did that, but anyway, we'll have to wait and see on that point. It's interesting for sure. As the scene ends, he's like I said, back-footed and confused, and then he sees his wife again. He sees Lena again, and she again guilts him like almost as much as anyone else in the room who's actually there. Says, the realm is at war. Are you protecting our daughters? And he's like, I haven't even had a conversation with them this season.
Yeah, I literally ignored Bela as I stormed off to come here, didn't say a single word to her, and haven't sent word. Like, yeah, you're ignoring Rhaenyra, but you could contact Rhaena or Bela. Exactly. She's exactly right to call him out on this. He's been so absent.
That's the one thing we can cling to, is that he has the guilt. The guilt is there. At least he's not a complete psychopath that just has no concern at all, which is like, well, hopefully this brings some good out of him. I don't know that it will, but yeah.
Tony Soprano had some guilt too.
He sure did. Again, that's why I brought him up. He's a good example. Like it helped him, but it didn't really necessarily make him a better person, that therapy.
Not stop him from being a villain.
No, it didn't. Let's talk about the Oedipus dream. Yes, interestingly, that Daemon is a Greek word, and he's the one having this Greek moment. Because even Targaryens don't bang their moms. That's and isn't it weird how like incest is creepy, but this is definitely creepier. Like this is a level of incest that's like, this is the worst, right? Is this the worst kind of incest? Father, daughter, mother, son. Like I think that's the worst kind.
You see in this shot how haunted Daemon is by this.
Once he realizes who it is, because at first he doesn't.
He is not like, ooh, hot, what a great wet dream I had. He's like, no, that was a messed up dream. Like, man, crap. I got some problems.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like the vibe in it too. He does, and this is why it's important that Alys points out, it's too bad you didn't know your mother. That's why that line is really big, because that's why he doesn't recognize her in the dream. He doesn't even he barely knows what she looks like, and there's a few differences here than what we would have imagined from her book version, which might be just the show didn't care. They just made her look like a Targaryen. But it might be because Daemon doesn't actually know what she looks like. So they're having sex in the dream, but it's more like him pleasuring her while she praises him. Like she's stroking his ego while he's stroking her. Yeah. And
can I also just say, Aziz?
Yeah.
How much I love the idea to have generic Targaryen as his mother. I'm like, I've already seen so many tweets of people being really upset about this. And I'm like, you guys, just take a moment. Like, one, I've seen people upset that she doesn't look like Alyssa looks like in the books. And two, I've seen people upset that he's screwing his mom in his dream, and I'm like, that's the point. It's like the darkest, like most messed up thing he could think about, and he doesn't even actually know what his mom looks like. He just sees this idealized, like perfect Targaryen woman, and I think it's brilliantly done right here. I just shout out to them, even if they pissed off a lot of people by not giving her a broken nose. Like, Daemon he's not going to picture her flaws. Why would he picture that?
It's just like every show, movie, fandom, and even in real life, people imagine that when you go to the afterlife, you're whole again. So her nose wouldn't be broken. it would be healed.
But she also has silver hair and not dirty blonde hair, and
That's
also
true.
doesn't have multicolored eyes. Again, even if Daemon has been told your mother had those features, in his weird like dream state here, he's not gonna think like, if you have a dream, that's not how it works. You're gonna picture like what you picture your silver-haired perfect Targaryen mother looking like. And if we think Alys has any kind of impact in this dream or knowledge, then that could be at play as well. I don't necessarily think
if she's affecting
control,
it. Yeah, he saw how he saw Daemon. I mean, he saw himself as Aemond. Like, that's not what he looks
doesn't
like.
wear an eye
It's a
patch.
dream version. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that there.
I don't know, Shay. I think this is messed up. Daemon should really be dreaming about having sex with his cousin and his niece.
So the thing she
I'm
says,
okay with cousin niece incest. I draw it at the mom.
I draw the line him up. She calls him stronger than his brother, that Viserys lacked the stamina for the throne, that you're the fearless dragon rider, the best swordsman. And then she calls him her favorite son, and that's when he's like, wait, what? Excuse me? Favorite what now? Was that S-U-N? I hope so. And his dream self becomes confused, and there's that trail of blood by her neck, which is...
Can I tell you what I think about with that? Like, it keeps being like one hand, you know? And like, I think some of it has to maybe his guilt about the beheading of Jaehaerys, but I think more of what I keep coming back to is his guilt over, it wasn't bloody, but over strangling Rhaenyra. I feel that that was the hand he used to strangle his wife, and I feel that the fact that it's one hand in particular is really notable to me, and that's what I keep coming back to is Rhaenyra guilt. It was even when he beheads Rhaenyra, she's even in the dress she was wearing when he strangled her, when he choked her out, you know? So,
and he didn't choke her one-handed. That's why it's important to point out. Yeah, he
that,
didn't.
If it was two bloody hands, I'd be like, he feels guilt over all of the death and all of that. But I think it's more directed.
You know, when he smashed his wife's head in with the stone, do you think he did it with one or two hands? Because there's that too.
Yeah, there's that too.
Good one, but I just, you know, like, he should feel guilty over that, but I don't think he does. I don't think we'll see a Ray of Royce vision. I just don't think we will. I would love that.
And by the way,
I like your take, Shay. To be clear, I wanted to get the dig in on killing his Aaron wife, but
by the way, generic Targaryen.
Wife, so.
Generic Targaryen is spelled Genearic. Generic, yes, Targaryen. Yeah. So this also is a point, though. Him thinking of, oh, you're the better warrior. That means you're better than your brother. This very much ties into what I was saying about Viserys being more peaceful, and how it goes into that gendered argument of, well, he's a man. He's more prepared for war. Well, Viserys is a man, but he's not more prepared for war. So what are you saying here? It's just might makes right. Like, that's it. That's what it boils down to. And it's like, well, that's not good. You know, I don't get behind that. So, Vale and Rhaenyra. This is a great conversation. They talk about Alyssa as well. So it ties into the scene with his mother, because they add more detail about her, and this is pretty cool, and maybe it gets into a little more of Daemon's psyche. Alyssa was the first rider of Meleys, and the only other rider besides Rhaenys, and it's pointed that Meleys was really fast, like the fastest beast who ever lived, was what Baela says, and that might be, like, I don't know if she could really know that for a fact, but Meleys was really fast, and that's part of... That enters into the discussion of why she was deployed the way she was, why Rhaenys thought she had maybe the chance to win, and things like that. The fact that she rejected Daemon is interesting, and might be like part of his psyche, like his mother's dragon rejected him. That's the one he went for first, but didn't reject Rhaenys, right? Like, oh, well, maybe this dragon prefers women. I don't know. So 2 out of 2, that doesn't exactly prove a pattern, but you know, it's something. And Alyssa was very interesting in that she... Maybe this is book canon only, but until we're told otherwise, I assume it's also show canon. When Viserys was like 3 days old, she strapped him to her chest and flew off on her dragon, Meleys, and took him flying. And then did the same for Daemon within a few days of his birth, which was about 3 years later. So, yeah, so get him started young. Talk about like that's like another level of like, well, piercing your ears when you're really young. No, take them on their first dragon ride when they're 3 days old. But... I'm sure they were strapped in well, you know. So that's some good lore. Any comments on that, y'all? Or should we move on to...
Yes. I love that they referred to Alyssa here, and I think you're right, Aziz, that it does give us that necessary insight into the fact that he kind of always longed to have a closeness to his mom, perhaps. I think that makes sense to me. It just makes sense. But also, I just want to say, in this scene, I know what happens. I've read the book. Like, I know that Corlys was going to be offered the hand pin, you know? But when she pulls the box out and she, like, is going to give it to, I don't know why my picture isn't loading up, but she's going to give it to Bela there was, like, a brief moment where, my heart was in my throat and I was like, Bela? I was like, no, I knew that Corlys was. It was just, like, this brief moment, and I'm so curious if any, like, show-only people were like, what's she giving Bela? Like, what did you think she was giving Bela? What was happening here? Anyways, I find it to be a little bit manipulative of Rhaenyra to use Bela in this method to get Corlys on board. I think she's right to do it. I don't think it's wrong, but, like, it's like she's kind of, like, having this bonding morning moment with Bela just to kind of get her to take the handpin to Corlys. Like, maybe not just for that, but yeah. I don't know. It was... Which is maybe me giving props to Rhaenyra just as much as, like, saying, like, it was manipulative. She needs to be manipulative. She needs to, like, make things happen that are good for her. It was a good move.
Yeah, and Bela's clearly the right person to send, even if we're just looking at it in retrospect. And she wants to rely on Bela more and more, so she has to send her into a variety of situations to see how she handles them. It's like, okay, she did good there. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use her again in a similar diplomatic situation or something, you know? Because, yeah, she's a young woman. She doesn't fully know what she's capable of yet. Even Bela doesn't know what she's fully capable of yet. By the way, with the mentioning Daemon and his mother issues, yet another parallel to Aemond. Very clearly has mother issues. He comes out and says that. Ewan Mitchell does in the interview that I referred to earlier today. He's like, yeah, this dude has mommy issues. And, yeah, so does Daemon. The 1015th parallel between those two.
And I guess Bela and Rhaena have daddy issues and mommy issues. They don't have a good lot in life at all, and they seem pretty well adjusted. I will say, like, Bela and Rhaena seem pretty decent.
They have each other. That helped.
I mean, do they? It seems like
they did have each other.
They've been separated for large parts of their lives, considering Bela was over with Rhaenys and Rhaena was not. You know, like, they have been separated for pretty large bits of their life.
That's true.
And
they have large amounts of time together too, though.
But yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, they are self-reliant. And
Daemon and Viserys had each other. It didn't do too much good.
So our final scene of the episode is the Jace and Rhaenyra scene where they discuss the blood of the dragon. Rhaenyra again reading about Visenya. Jace is like, don't be like her. And it's a little ominous when she's like, well, why shouldn't I be? And all he has is, it was a long time ago. He doesn't have a good retort for that. He's kind of, you know,
I liked your comment, Aziz. You're like, well, he's like, I'm not Maegor. Don't compare me.
Yeah.
Like, your son is not Maegor. Don't be like her in that. I was like, okay, maybe that's the only valid reason Jace has to balk at the Visenya comparison.
It's like, if you're Visenya, then I'm, yeah. So
I think he didn't want to say it. I think he didn't want to attack her idol or accuse her of being tyrannical or whatever else, you know.
Yeah.
I think he's like, it was a long time ago. Let's not get into this yet.
And this is the minute he's expecting to get chewed out for going off by himself too. So he's also already like expecting to be punished or yelled at, or he did the thing where you ask forgiveness later, and this is him doing that. He's like, ask permission later, act first. So anyway, so this is part of her frustration. She lashes out with that answer regarding Visenya, in part because, as she explains to him, she's like, look, even you are out here doing things for us and you did a great job, but like I need to be active. I can't be sitting here doing nothing. I need to fight for my claim. And frankly, with our situation vis-a-vis the dragons, especially with Daemon doing his own thing, how can we sideline me? We can't afford to sideline one of three dragons when Jace's dragon is smaller, Bela's dragon is smaller. She's got the only like medium-sized dragon of the three of them, and Daemon's is even larger. But again, he's not like cooperating. So she's like, y'all, I'm going to have to fight. Like, we're going to have to take that risk until the conversation takes a little turn here and it gets pretty interesting. It's like, well, you know, there's other options. Jace, while talking about the problem, they really hone in on Vhagar. Like, okay, well, it's Vhagar is the problem. Everyone's complaining about being afraid of Vhagar. And I get it. You know, that's Vhagar is the problem. If we could take care of her, our options open wide open. Well, our options get wide open, yeah. So Jace suggests, well, maybe we could get Daemon to take on Aemond, and Rhaenyra's like, I'm not talking about Daemon right now.
Can't get Daemon to do anything.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
Make him part of your plan.
She's like, if that would be nice, if, they just do that to each other, but that's not a thing right now, if ever. So Jace is like, okay, moves on, mentions Rhaena. It's like, well, Rhaena can take a dragon, right? And we're reminded that she has tried to mount either Silverwing or Vermithor. And I think this was actually mentioned in season 1. It seemed familiar when they mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, I think they actually said that before, and I think I just forgot about it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the second time that's mentioned, which is a good mention. It's like, why didn't she try to mount one of those other big-ass dragons? Well, I guess she did. Now, Jace, as has been shown before, he knows he's a bastard. He doesn't necessarily talk about it, but when Vale brought up, like, what about Sir Harwin Strong? He's like, yeah, he loved us. He's like, of course he did. Because they were talking to him. They were talking about him as if he was the father without calling him the father. They know. He knows. He knows she knows. So he knows he's a bastard. And downplays the Valyrian history. He's like, yeah, the Valyrians said that only Valyrians can ride dragons. But look at me, y'all. Like, I'm only half Valyrian, and I got a dragon. How far does this go? How far can we push this? How much dragon blood do you actually need, if any? Now, do the Targaryens really want everyone to know the answer to that question? That's kind of why, that's part of her hesitation, I think. She's like, this is a mad thought, right? That's what she says. But then they're like, there could be scores, and they look at the books and the scrolls, like, there could be a lot of candidates here. Maybe some of them are decent individuals that we could maybe trust. Whether that's true or not, whether you can actually trust someone after you give them a dragon, the power goes to their head. Who knows? You're just like strapping and giving some random dude a nuke or some random woman a nuke. What's going to happen? So, but again, they're in do anything to win mode. They're in win or die mode. So it's like, would they bring this up if it wasn't going to happen? That would be such a thing to tease to not do, right? Right, Sean?
So my prediction here, this is what I'm wondering, what I'm piecing together. Because they have also presented us this Ulf character who's claiming to have Targaryen blood.
Yeah.
And they really seem to be focusing on this Hugh character who has blonde hair and wears it just like Aemond and Daemon does.
Yeah, he does.
I wonder if these characters are potential dragon riders. I wonder if they're going to get dug up. Their lineage is going to get dug up. Hugh has motivation, right, to be angry with the Greens. He's trapped in town. He feels like he's got no hope. He hasn't been paid for his job. So that's what I started to piece together, to wonder about if that's a direction they're going to go, is to Hugh and Ulf. I can't think of another candidate right now. Maybe they'll introduce all new characters, but it seems like they're looking for candidates to be dragon riders, and the show has presented us some candidates to be dragon riders.
Yeah, so, there's probably more than that too, right? Yeah, like you said, there could be. Jay says there could be scores and scores, and Rhaenyra's like, it's a mad thought, like I said, and then Jay says, it's better than defeat and death, which again, that just goes to show anything goes, because that's the alternative. It's like even these kind of good guys like Jace and Rhaenyra come off as better people, more ethical than a lot of the people involved in this war so far. And even they're like, yeah, we gotta just leverage and mortgage other aspects of our existence to get through this. We gotta widen our ethical concerns and just take more risks and see what happens.
I will say, though, I'm still concerned and suspicious. Let's say you find someone else who can ride a dragon, and they are, I don't know, like their bloodline is still close enough to some noble house, and they're an honorable person. Who says they're going to be good at it? Rhaenys is maybe the most experienced dragon/dragon rider there is, and she came close. She took Vhagar to the ground, but still could not finish the job. So even if you get a dragon that's on par with size of Vhagar and someone who can ride it, that's different from successfully defeating Vhagar.
Oh, yeah. You're totally right. Yeah, so it's super interesting, isn't it? And like they say, these are bigger dragons than the ones they already have. So if it's the whole power goes to someone's head, or if the military might angle, or both, yeah, like they're empowering someone to be stronger than they are, potentially, in a way. Not with a stronger claim or a stronger, like, their place in the hierarchy or whatever, but just like more physically and martially powerful.
like Aemond has moved into a more powerful position for a number of reasons, but a larger one is because of Vhagar.
He's larger one is the large dragon, yeah.
And he seems mostly to be able to control Vhagar, but it seemed like Vhagar is a little out of his hands when he killed Luke, right?
Yeah.
And so these new dragon riders, again, even if they're good at riding the dragon, it still doesn't mean they're going to completely control the dragon. That's it.
And they haven't been in these situations. They're like, well, I don't like. Well, surely all the other times Vhagar fought a dragon her size, it went like this, So I know exactly what to expect. No one knows. Like even the Targaryens who have passed don't know. None of them have seen like two really big dragons fight each other. This is the closest they've got was Vhagar versus Meleys, and that was devastating and insane. And we're talking about Silverwing and Vermithor are apparently even bigger than that. Vermithor definitely is. We haven't seen Silverwing yet, but Vermithor's the second biggest dragon in the realm. I think Silverwing might be third, but it's whatever. She's really big, and we'll see what they do with that. So very exciting.
One little hope I have is that if the Blacks do this and realize they can get more dragon riders, then maybe the Greens will also, and they might track down that Criston Cole has Targaryen blood, and he gets to have sex with two queens, Lord Commander, Hand of the King, and Dragon Rider.
That's more titles than Danny or John. I mean, damn.
That's right.
The true Song of Ice and Fire. The true Azor Ahai is Criston Cole. You heard it here first, y'all. Y'all. That's right. And I think that does it for today, folks. Any final thoughts? I liked your theory there, Sean. We'll see how it goes. And we hope to see a lot of y'all for Wednesday. It'll be a spoilery episode with Jason Concepcion. Right now, we're planning on doing a Q&A, so get your questions ready. It's a good thing to do in the middle of the season. I think the halfway point is the appropriate time for getting things clarified and getting ourselves situated for the next several episodes, which will be a big movers in the story, I think. But we'll have to wait and see. So thanks to Sean and Ashea. And thanks as well to Bran the Builder for our awesome intro. We love our cool Targaryen Fire and Blood intro so very much. Thanks as well to Michael Klarfeld for the maps. That's claradox.de, Claradox.de. You can get copies of those maps yourself. They don't have to look as big as this. They can be smaller. They can be bigger. You can get them printed in a variety of ways. All you do is pay for the file, and then you can do whatever you want with it, like we have. And until next time, you know what to do. Valar Reedus.